Get her things out of here. Michael Carter yanked Claire's dresses from the master closet and threw them onto the hallway floor one by one, while Olivia stood in the doorway watching. Her mother's jewelry box went next, hit the wall, scattered across the hardwood. All of it. I want every trace of her gone before morning. Olivia laughed softly and stepped over the broken clasp of a pearl necklace Claire had worn on their wedding day. Michael handed her the key to the Ashford estate like a crown. He had no idea that key had never belonged to him. If this story already has your attention, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Claire Whitmore did not cry the first time she found the messages. She sat alone at the small wooden desk in her private office on the third floor of the Ashford estate, her reading glasses pushed up on her nose, a cup of chamomile tea going cold beside her keyboard, and she read every single one, slowly, deliberately, the way she read every contract before she signed it, the way she read every financial report before she approved it, the way she had always approached everything in her life, with patience, with precision, and without flinching. The messages were between Michael and a woman named Olivia Harper. They were not casual. They were not ambiguous. They were the messages of a man who had decided privately and completely that his future belonged to someone else, and that all he needed to do was wait for the right moment to announce it. Claire scrolled through 3 months of conversation in 45 minutes. She noted the dates. She noted the specific language. She noticed the way Michael described their marriage to Olivia. Cold, she was always working. She never really understood him. She was more in love with her company than with him. She noticed the way Olivia responded with sympathy, with flattery, with the practiced warmth of a woman who had learned exactly which words a man like Michael needed to hear. She noticed the part where Michael described the mansion. "It's beautiful," he had written. "You're going to love it. It's everything you deserve." And she noticed that he referred to it without hesitation as his. Claire closed the laptop. She sat in the quiet for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called her attorney. "Rebecca," she said when the line connected, "I need to have a conversation, not an emergency, not tonight, but soon, this week." "Of course," Rebecca Lawson said. "Should I be concerned?" "No," Claire said. "I should have made this call sooner, that's all." She hung up. She picked up her tea, found it cold, set it back down. She looked out the window at the grounds of the estate, the long drive lined with oak trees, the garden she had planted the first summer she owned the property, the stone fountain that had taken 6 weeks to restore after she bought the place. She had purchased the Ashford estate 11 years ago, 2 years before she met Michael Carter at a charity dinner in downtown Atlanta. At the time, it was a distressed property, neglected, undervalued, sitting on 30 acres of land that the previous family could no longer afford to maintain. Claire had seen it for exactly what it was, a foundation waiting for someone patient enough to invest in it. She bought it through Bennett Legacy Holdings, the private family trust she had established in her late 20s, structured carefully held in her name alone. When she married Michael 3 years later, she brought him into her life, into her home, into the world she had built. She never transferred ownership, not because she anticipated this moment, but because she had learned long before Michael that certain things in life were worth protecting. She had simply never imagined that one of the things she would need protecting from was her own husband. Michael Carter was not a bad man in the way that obvious cartoonish men are bad. He was the more dangerous kind, the kind who convinced themselves they deserved more than they had worked for, and who resented the people closest to them for quietly knowing the truth. Howe was charming. Howe was handsome in a practiced way, the kind of handsome that required maintenance, a good haircut, the right watch, the right shirt. He knew how to walk into a room and make people feel like they had been waiting for him. He told good stories. He laughed at the right moments. He remembered people's names, their kids' names, their sports teams. For the first 4 years of their marriage, Claire had believed in him. She believed in the business he told her he was building. She believed in the potential he said he had. When the first venture failed, a restaurant concept he had been convinced would transform dining in Atlanta, she absorbed the financial loss without complaint. When the second one stalled, a consulting firm that never quite found traction, she covered the overhead, reorganized what she could, and told him that setbacks were part of the process. She believed that beneath the charm and the ambition and the slightly too loud confidence was a man who was genuinely trying, a man who loved her, A man who, given time, would find the place where his energy and his ability actually aligned. What she had not understood until she read those messages was that Michael had never been trying. He had been waiting for her success to grow large enough that he could step in front of it and tell people it was his. He had started doing it gradually, so gradually she had almost not noticed. Small things at first. He would describe her company's growth to friends as though he had been involved in the decisions. He would take calls from her business contacts and speak with the casual authority of a partner, even though he held no role at Whitmore Innovations. He would mention the estate, my home, my property, in the practiced way of someone who had rehearsed it until it felt true. By the time Claire noticed, it had become his entire personality, and by the time she found the messages, he had apparently decided that the woman he had been performing success for, Olivia Harper, 29 years old, a marketing coordinator at an events company who was absolutely dazzled by what she believed was his lifestyle, deserved to inherit the performance permanently. Rebecca Lawson met Claire for lunch 3 days later at a quiet restaurant near Rebecca's office. Rebecca was 61, sharp-edged in the way that 3 decades of family law practice made a person sharp, and she had represented Claire in 2 previous matters, a contract dispute with a vendor and the estate planning work she had done after her mother passed. They had the kind of professional relationship that had slowly, without either of them formally acknowledging it, become a friendship. Rebecca ordered black coffee and a salad. Claire ordered the same, though she was not particularly hungry. "Tell me," Rebecca said. Claire told her. All of it. The messages, the timeline, the language Michael had used with Olivia, the way he described the estate. She did not dramatize it. She presented it the way she presented a business situation, facts, sequence, implication. Rebecca listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, Rebecca set down her coffee cup and said, "What do you want?" "I want clarity," Claire said. "I want to understand exactly where I stand legally before I do anything. I want to know what he has access to, what he doesn't have access to, and what my exposure is if this becomes a legal matter." "The estate," Rebecca said. "Bennett Legacy Holdings. His name is not on anything," Claire said. "Not the deed, not the trust documents, not the utility accounts. When we married, my attorney at the time advised me to keep it separate. I followed that advice." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Good. And Whitmore Innovations? Private company wholly owned by me. He has no equity position, no shareholder agreement, no employment contract. He attended events as my spouse, nothing more. Bank accounts. We have a joint household account for shared expenses. I deposit a monthly allocation into it. My business and personal accounts are separate." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Claire, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer me honestly. Always. Are you looking for a way out of this marriage? Or are you looking for a way to protect yourself while you decide?" Claire looked at her without hesitation. "I've already decided. I've been deciding for 6 months. I didn't call you sooner because I wanted to make sure I was thinking clearly and not reacting. I'm not reacting. I am completely clear." Rebecca nodded. "Then we start building the documentation." "I already have documentation," Claire said. She slid a small drive across the table. Rebecca looked at it. "What's on here?" "Everything," Claire said. She had not planned to gather evidence the way she had. It had happened organically, the way most things did with Claire. She identified a situation, assessed what she needed to understand it fully, and moved methodically toward that understanding. The estate had a security system she had installed 3 years ago after a break-in attempt at a neighboring property. Cameras at the perimeter, the entrance, the main living areas. Everything logged, time-stamped, stored remotely. Michael knew the system existed. He had simply, in his characteristic way, never bothered to learn how it worked. He did not know, for example, that Claire could access the footage from anywhere, that she had watched on her laptop in a hotel room in Chicago during a conference as Michael walked Olivia through the front entrance on a Tuesday evening when he had told Claire he was in Nashville for a meeting. She had watched him show Olivia the library. She had watched Olivia run her hand along the bookshelf Claire had spent 6 months curating, pulling out a first edition, saying something that made Michael laugh. She had watched them walk upstairs. She had closed the laptop and ordered room service and spent the rest of the evening reviewing the acquisition proposal she had been preparing for a board meeting the following morning. Because the work still existed. The company still needed her, and she was not going to collapse. But she had also, before she closed the laptop, forwarded the footage to a secure cloud account. She had been doing that since. Every visit, every evening, every conversation she had witnessed through the security system, Michael and Olivia in the kitchen, Michael and Olivia in the living room, Michael and Olivia on the back terrace, Michael showing Olivia which rooms he intended to change. The room he wanted to turn into a home office had been Claire's meditation space. The closet he wanted to clear out held her mother's things. He had showed Olivia the garden, my garden, he had said, and Claire had watched the words appear on the screen in front of her with a stillness that surprised even herself. She had planted every row of that garden. She had ordered the soil amendments, chosen the varieties, worked alongside the gardener for a full season, learning how to do it properly. The garden was one of the things she was proudest of in the entire estate. Not because it was impressive, it wasn't particularly, not by the standards of a property like the Ashford estate, but because it was hers in the most intimate sense. She had made it grow. She had put her hands in the dirt and learned something she had not known before. And he was showing it to another woman, like a dealer showing off inventory. "You said you want clarity," Rebecca said at that lunch. "I want to give you something else as well. I want to give you a strategy." "Tell me." "You have substantial leverage here. The estate is protected. The company is protected. The joint account is minimal. In a divorce proceeding, he will argue for lifestyle support. He's been living in that house, presenting as your partner, building a social identity around your success. He will have an attorney who argues that entitles him to something. What does he actually have a claim to? Less than he thinks. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, not community property. The estate, structured as it is, would almost certainly be classified as separate property." Whitmore Innovations, same analysis. The joint account, the furniture, some personal property, that's the realistic exposure. Claire absorbed this. So he built a decade of belief on very little foundation. That is my assessment, yes. And he is about to find that out. Yes, Rebecca said. The question is when and how. Claire looked at her. I want him to find out himself. I don't want to tell him. I want him to walk into the reality of this situation in a way that he cannot misremember or reframe later. I want it to be undeniable. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. You're not thinking of confronting him at the property. I'm thinking, Claire said carefully, that Michael has been planning something. He mentioned 2 weeks ago that he needed to travel. A business opportunity in Florida, he said. I have reason to believe that trip involves bringing Olivia to the estate while I'm away. And are you going to be away? Claire smiled for the first time in the conversation. I'm going to tell him I'm going to be away. Timestamp 10 minutes. The plan took 3 more weeks to fully develop. Claire did not rush it. She did not tip her hand. She went to work each day, ran her company with the same disciplined focus she always had, attended 2 conferences, closed a significant partnership deal with a technology firm in Seattle, and came home each evening to a husband who was courteous, slightly distracted, and clearly building towards something. She watched him. She had always been good at watching people. It was one of the things that made her effective as a business leader. She paid attention not just to what people said, but to the small behavioral shifts that preceded decisions. The way someone's eye contact changed when they were nervous. The particular quality of a pause before an evasion. Michael, she had come to understand, was not a complex man to read. He had tells she had simply stopped cataloging because she had not needed to. But now she needed to, and so she cataloged them again with fresh attention. He was buying things. Small things purchased separately in cash or on a credit card he believed she did not monitor. Candles. A bottle of wine she recognized as expensive, but that he had never purchased for the 2 of them. A gift she did not know what it was, but she saw the wrapping at the back of his car briefly before he moved it. He was making plans. She caught fragments of phone calls when he did not realize she was nearby. Once in the kitchen, she heard him laugh in a low, private way and say into the phone, She'll be gone until Sunday. We have the whole weekend. He turned and found her standing in the doorway and said still smoothly, Hey, that was Doug working out the details on a contract thing. And she said, Of course, and handed him a glass of water and went back upstairs. Whole weekend, she had thought. She texted Rebecca from the bathroom. He's planning for the 2nd weekend of next month. I'm going to confirm a trip. I need you to be available Friday evening. Rebecca had replied within 2 minutes. I'll be there. The second critical piece fell into place when Claire realized she needed someone else in the house, not for protection, not because she was afraid of Michael. She had never been afraid of him, and she was not afraid of him now. She needed a witness, a credible, impartial presence who could confirm exactly what transpired. She considered several people. She settled on two. The first was her longtime estate manager, Douglas Webb, not the same Douglas Michael had clumsily used as a cover story, but a real Douglas, a 63-year-old former property manager who had worked with Claire since she first purchased the estate and whose loyalty was absolute and uncomplicated. He knew the property down to the individual circuit breakers. He knew which cameras covered which angles. He was a quiet man, steady and unreadable, who had seen enough of Michael's casual entitlement over the years to understand without needing a full explanation why Claire was asking what she was asking. She called him on a Wednesday morning. "Doug, I need you to stay on property the second Friday of next month through Sunday. I need you available and present but not visible unless I ask for you." "Understood," he said. "Am I going to need to call anyone?" "No, but have your phone charged. Always do." The second person was more complicated. Claire had a younger sister, Mara, 53, an architect in Savannah, who had never particularly liked Michael and had never been especially quiet about it. Mara was sharp and funny and occasionally too direct for her own good, and she and Michael had a cordial but faintly hostile relationship built on years of Michael sensing that Mara saw through him and Mara knowing that he sensed it. She called Mara on a Thursday. "I need you to come up the second weekend of next month. Stay here. Don't tell Michael." There was a pause. "Claire." "Yes." "Is it bad?" "It's been bad for a while. I've been handling it. I just need you here for this part." Another pause. She could hear Mara breathing, doing the calculations. Then quietly, "I'll be there Friday afternoon." "Thank you." "Claire." Mara's voice was different now, softer. "Are you okay?" "I am," Claire said, and meant it. "I genuinely am." The Friday in question was the 14th of the month. That morning Claire had breakfast with Michael as she usually did. She made coffee. He made toast. They talked about nothing in particular, the weather, a news story. He had seen something about the neighbor's fence. It was the practiced comfort of people who had stopped really talking but maintained the shape of it out of habit. "I'm heading to Charlotte this afternoon," she said as she rinsed her cup. "The board meeting runs through Sunday morning. I'll probably stay over Sunday night and come back Monday." Michael nodded. "Okay, I'll hold things down here." "I know you will," she said. She looked at him for just a moment, not pointedly, not with anything that might tip him toward caution, just a moment's direct attention. He looked comfortable, confident, eager for her to leave. She pulled her rolling bag from the closet, kissed him on the cheek, and walked out the front door. She drove 40 minutes to Rebecca's office, left the car in the parking structure, and got into Rebecca's car. They drove back together. Mara had arrived that afternoon as promised, through the back entrance of the property, a gate accessible from the service road that Michael had never once used in 10 years of living there. Doug had met her and brought her in quietly. By 6 in the evening, all 4 of them were in the estate: Claire, Rebecca, Mara, and Doug. They had dinner together at the kitchen table, soup bread, nothing complicated, and talked through the evening with a calm that felt to Claire like the stillness before something that had been building for a very long time finally arrived. "What if he doesn't come tonight?" Mara asked. "He'll come tonight," Claire said. "You sound very sure." "He bought wine and candles 2 weeks ago. He's been waiting for this." Mara looked at her. "How are you this calm?" "Because I've been thinking about this for 6 months," Claire said. "I've had the panic. I've had the grief. I've done all of that quietly by myself in the middle of the night, so that when this moment came, I would be standing on solid ground. I am standing on solid ground." Mara reached across the table and put her hand over Claire's. Claire did not need to say anything to that. Timestamp 20 minutes. Michael's car came up the drive at 8:47 that evening. Doug, monitoring the cameras from his room at the back of the estate, texted Claire a single word. "Here," Claire replied, "thank you." She could hear from her position at the top of the main staircase, seated in the wingback chair she had moved there specifically for this evening, facing the entrance below the sound of the front door. She had set the security system to disengage silently at Michael's code, so there would be no alarm, no warning, just the door opening and the sound of 2 people coming in from the night. She heard Olivia Harper's voice before she saw her. "Oh my God, Michael, this is even more beautiful in person." "I told you," Michael said, and his voice carried something Claire had not heard in a long time: genuine pride, genuine animation. He sounded alive in a way he had not sounded around her in years. She sat with that for exactly 1 moment. Then she let it go. She heard them moving through the entryway, Michael narrating the space in that tour guide way she recognized from the security footage, the ceilings, the stonework, the original flooring. He was giving her the tour, her home, the home she had bought before he existed in her life. "Come see the library," Michael said. They passed beneath the staircase without looking up. Claire watched them go. She waited. Mara was in the east wing, Rebecca was in the study, Doug was at the back of the house. They waited. "Let him have the tour," Claire had said. "Let him pour the wine. Let him say what he is going to say. Give him enough time to commit himself fully to what he believes this evening is." She heard him in the library. She heard the pop of a wine bottle. She heard Olivia say something low and happy. She heard Michael say with a confidence that was almost architectural in its completeness, "This is our future, Olivia. This house, this life, all of it." And then Claire stood up. She walked down the stairs. She did not hurry. She walked the way she walked into board meetings when a decision had already been made and the only thing left was to deliver it. She walked into the library. Michael saw her first. The color did not leave his face gradually. It vanished all at once as if someone had simply switched it off. Olivia turned, following his gaze, and froze. The three of them stood in the library of the Ashford estate, Claire's library, her books, her furniture, her wine that Michael had poured without thought or permission, and for a long moment no one spoke. Then Claire looked at Michael, not at Olivia, at him. "You said you'd hold things down," she said. Michael opened his mouth. He closed it. He tried again. "Claire, this is not you. Said you were going to Charlotte." "I said I had a board meeting," she said. "I didn't specify where." "You told me Charlotte." "Then I misspoke." She walked to the sideboard, picked up a clean glass, and poured herself a measure from the bottle he had opened. She swirled it, examined the color, sipped. "This is a good vintage," she said. "Good choice." Michael's jaw was tight. He was doing what she had watched him do in difficult situations, their entire marriage cycling rapidly through possible framings, looking for the version of reality that could be massaged into something survivable. Olivia Harper had not moved. She was younger than Claire had expected, and older looking than her photos, with the tight alertness of someone who had just stepped into a situation they did not fully understand and were trying to assess as quickly as possible. "Olivia," Claire said, turning to her with a directness that was not hostile, but was completely unsparing. "My name is Claire Whitmore Carter. I'm Michael's wife. I own this house. I want to be very honest with you right now, so that there's no confusion later about what occurred here." Olivia looked at Michael. Michael said, "Claire, stop." "Don't," Claire said, and the single word was so controlled, so absolutely final, that he did stop. She looked back at Olivia. "You've been in my home twice before tonight. I know about both visits. I want you to know that I don't hold that against you specifically. Michael is responsible for what he told you and what he promised you, and I assume he told you things that made this feel acceptable. That's a conversation you should have with him separately later, when he has had time to explain himself to you, which he will need to do." Olivia's voice came out small. "He told me that you and he—" "I know what he told you," Claire said. She set down her glass. She turned back to Michael, and now for the first time she opened the folder. She placed it on the table between them with a quietness that was more devastating than any dramatic gesture could have been. She did not slam it. She did not throw it. She simply placed it there the way you place a document in front of someone you know has not read it, but now must. "The deed to this property," she said. "Bennett Legacy Holdings. My name, my trust, my signature. Recorded 11 years ago, 2 years before we met." Michael looked at the document. He did not touch it. "There is no version of this home," Claire said, "in which your name appears. Not the deed, not the trust agreement, not the insurance, the utility accounts, or the property tax records. You have lived here as my guest. That is the accurate description of your relationship to this property." The word guest hit him the way she had known it would not, because it was cruel, but because it was precise. She watched him absorb it. "Claire, He started again, and she heard the pivot coming, the shift toward injury, toward making himself the person who had been wronged, toward the story where she had hidden this from him. And wasn't that a form of deception? Wasn't that— "Don't," she said again and again. He stopped. "There is nothing you can say in this room tonight," she said quietly, "that will change what is in these documents, or in these." She placed a second folder beside the first. 5 months of recorded conversations, security footage, time-stamped entries, your own words. "Michael describing my home to this woman as your legacy, your achievement, your gift to her. If you had said those things about something that belonged to you, I would have no standing to be angry about them. But you did not say them about something that belonged to you." Olivia stepped back. She had been doing a slow, almost invisible retreat since Claire entered the room, and now she was close to the edge of the library doorway, her hand finding the frame. "I think," she said, her voice strange and careful, "I think I should—" "Yes," Claire said, "you should." Olivia looked at Michael. He did not look back at her. Timestamp 30 minutes. After Olivia left, and the sound of the front door closing was one of the most specific sounds Claire had ever heard, Michael sat down. He sat in the chair nearest to him, the leather armchair that had been there when Claire bought the property, that she had reupholstered herself in a dark cognac color the second winter she owned the place. He sat in it the way a person sits when the story they have been telling themselves has run out of room to expand further. I was quiet for a long time. Claire remained standing. She did not feel triumphant. She had known she would not feel triumphant. She felt the way she felt after a very long project finally reached its conclusion, tired in a deep way but also clean. The way you are clean after something that has been complicated is now simple. "How long?" Michael said finally. "How long have I known?" He nodded without looking at her. 6 months, she said. He closed his eyes. 6 months, he repeated. "Yes. And you didn't—" He stopped, started again. "You didn't say anything. What would you have wanted me to say?" She sat down across from him in the chair she used when she read in the evenings. "What answer would have satisfied you, Michael? If I had walked in 6 months ago and put those messages in front of you, what would you have told me?" He did not answer. "You would have told me I was overreacting," she said. "You would have told me it wasn't what it looked like. You would have been hurt that I invaded your privacy. And I would have spent the next 3 months managing your reaction instead of understanding my own situation. So I chose to understand my own situation first." He looked at her for the first time. His eyes were not what she expected. She had braced somewhere in herself for anger because anger was what Michael went to when he was cornered. Instead, what she saw was something she had not anticipated. Shame. Not performance shame, not the strategic version he sometimes deployed when he needed sympathy. This was real, the kind that looked like shock at one's own reflection. "I didn't think," he said. "You didn't think that it was. I didn't think it was this. What I was doing. I didn't think it had gotten this far." Claire looked at him. "Michael," she said carefully, "you moved her perfume into my closet." He flinched. "You promised her my house," she said. He looked at the floor. "You have been telling people, our friends, my business contacts, that you built this life. You have been claiming credit for 10 years of my work, and I let you because I believed it was harmless, because I thought it came from insecurity and not malice. And maybe some of it did, but at some point, insecurity that you never address becomes a choice. At some point, taking something that doesn't belong to you is just theft, even if the thing you're taking is someone else's story." He put his face in his hands. She did not soften what she had said, but she also did not add to it. She had said what needed to be said. She could hear Mara moving somewhere in the east wing, a door, a floorboard, the small sounds of the house around her, the house she had chosen and bought and poured herself into for 11 years, the house that was without question or ambiguity hers. Michael said into his hands, "What happens now?" She reached into the folder a third time. She placed the final document on the table between them. He looked at it without touching it. Divorce papers. Drawn up by Rebecca Lawson, reviewed by 2 additional attorneys, precise and complete, and requiring nothing from him except a signature. "Now," Claire said, "you decide how this goes. You can make it complicated and you will find that you have very little to work with. Or you can sign, and we will handle this the way 2 adults who once cared about each other should handle it, with efficiency and without malice." She stood. "I'm not your enemy, Michael, but I am no longer your wife. Those are the only two things I need you to understand tonight." She picked up her wine glass. She walked out of the library. Behind her in the chair that was not his in the home he had never owned, in the life he had spent 10 years inhabiting without truly earning, Michael Carter sat alone with the weight of what he had actually done. And upstairs in the kitchen, where she had spent 1,000 ordinary evenings, Rebecca was making tea, and Mara was setting out cups, and Doug had gone home, and the estate was quiet, the way it was always quiet at this hour, steady and unchanged and belonging, as it had always belonged to Claire. The pearl necklace was still on the floor when Claire woke up the next morning. She had not slept in the master bedroom. She had not gone anywhere near it. She had taken the guest room at the far end of the east wing, the one with the small writing desk she had used in the early years of owning the property when she would come out here alone on weekends and work through business plans in the quiet. She had slept well, which surprised her only briefly, and then she remembered that she had been preparing for this for 6 months, and the body, when it has been holding tension for a very long time, knows when it is finally safe to rest. She dressed. She went downstairs. She made coffee. Michael was not in the house. She had heard him leave sometime after midnight, the front door, the car engine, the long crunch of gravel that faded and then disappeared. She did not know where he had gone and did not need to. Rebecca had advised her the previous week that once the confrontation occurred, giving Michael space to process was actually in Claire's interest. A cornered man who had nowhere to go made impulsive decisions. A man given room to absorb the reality of his situation often came back quieter, more willing to negotiate from a realistic position. Claire poured her coffee and stood at the kitchen counter and thought about what came next. Mara came in 20 minutes later, still in her pajamas, hair loose, holding her phone in a way that suggested she had been awake for a while. "He's gone," Mara said, "since last night." "Good." Mara poured herself coffee and sat at the kitchen table. She wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at her sister with the direct, assessing gaze she had used since they were children. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Claire said honestly, "but clear. You were incredible last night." "I wasn't trying to be incredible. I was trying to be accurate." "Same thing sometimes." Mara sipped her coffee. "What does Rebecca think he'll do?" "She thinks he'll go to an attorney first, feel out his options, then he'll come back with a position." Claire sat down across from her. "He doesn't have much to negotiate with, but he doesn't fully know that yet. That's the part that concerns me. Not because I'm worried about the outcome, but because men who feel like they've lost everything sometimes make the situation ugly before they accept it." Mara looked at her. "Is he that kind of man?" Claire thought about it honestly. "I don't think so. Not at his core, but I've been wrong about him before." That sat between them for a moment. Then Mara said quietly, "I never liked him, Claire." "I know. I should have said it more clearly. I wouldn't have listened." Claire looked at her cup. "That's not a criticism of you. I needed to learn it myself. Some things you can't be told. You have to arrive at them through your own experience." She paused. "Michael and I had good years. I don't want to pretend we didn't because that would be dishonest. But the good years were built on something that was never as solid as I believed, and I think if I'm honest with myself, I knew that for longer than 6 months. I just wasn't ready to look at it directly." Mara reached across the table and covered Claire's hand with hers. This time Claire turned her hand over and held on. Rebecca called at 9:15 that morning. "How are you?" "Fine," Claire said. "He left last night. I don't know where." "I've already heard from his attorney." Claire went still. "That was fast." "He called Marcus Hale. You know who Marcus Hale is." "By reputation." Marcus Hale was a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset cases known in Atlanta legal circles for aggressive initial positioning and a talent for making straightforward situations feel contested. He was expensive, and he was effective, and the fact that Michael had gone to him within hours of the confrontation told Claire something important. "He's not going to sign quietly," she said. "Not immediately, no. Hale's opening position will be that Michael has equitable claim to the estate based on years of cohabitation and contribution to the marital household. He'll probably also argue that Whitmore Innovations appreciated significantly during the marriage, and that Michael's support role entitles him to a share of that appreciation." "His support role," Claire repeated. "I know. Rebecca, he attended 6 board dinners in 10 years. He once introduced himself to my CFO as my business partner." "I know." Rebecca said again, and there was something dry and precise in her voice. "We have documentation of what his actual role was. That's our advantage. But I want you to understand that Hale will make noise before he accepts the reality. Expect at least 60 days of posturing." "I expected more than that. You're handling this well." "I'm handling this the way I handle everything," Claire said. "One decision at a time." She hung up and looked out the window at the garden, which was still and green in the morning light, and thought about 60 days. She could do 60 days. She had done 6 months. Timestamp 8 minutes. 3 days later, Michael came back. He called first, which she appreciated. He did not simply appear at the door as if nothing had happened. "Can I come by? I need to get some things." "Of course," she said. Tomorrow afternoon, around 2. I'll be here." She was. She sat in the living room with a legal pad and a pen, working through some notes for a Whitmore Innovations quarterly review when she heard his car on the drive. She did not get up immediately. She finished the note she was writing, capped the pen, set the pad aside. By the time she walked to the entryway, he was inside. He looked bad. Not devastated bad, not broken bad, but the specific bad of a man who had not slept properly in 3 days and had spent those days confronting a version of himself that he did not enjoy. His jaw had the tight quality of suppressed feeling, and his eyes had something in them she had not seen in a long time, a kind of raw, stripped attention. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. They stood there for a moment, the two of them in the entry hall of the house that was hers, and Claire felt the full strange weight of it. 10 years of marriage breakfast together, arguments about small things, the time he had held her hand in the hospital, when her mother was dying, all of it present in the air between them, alongside the pearl necklace on the floor, and the dresses he had thrown, and the woman he had brought into her home and kissed in her doorway. All of it simultaneously true. "I have a few boxes in the car," he said. "I just need to get clothes and some personal things." "Take what you need," she said. "If you want to schedule a time for larger items, let Rebecca and your attorney work it out. But personal belongings take now." He nodded. He started toward the stairs, then stopped. He turned back. "Claire." "Yes." He looked at her with that stripped, uncomfortable directness. "The things I said to you the other night, what you showed me." He stopped. Tried again. "I've been trying to find a way to tell myself it wasn't as bad as it looked, that there was a version where I wasn't, where I didn't—" He stopped again. She waited. "I can't find it," he said. "The version where I wasn't that person. I've been looking for 3 days and I can't find it." She looked at him for a long moment. "Good," she said, not cruelly, simply. He blinked. "That's where accountability starts," she said. "When you stop looking for the version where you were justified." She paused. "Get your things, Michael. We'll handle the rest through our attorneys." He went upstairs. She went back to the living room and picked up her legal pad. Her hand was perfectly steady. He came down 45 minutes later with 2 bags and a box. He moved through the entryway quietly, efficiently, without looking at her. She heard him go into the study briefly, probably for something from the desk. He used the desk she had bought but that he had occupied for years, and then she heard him in the kitchen for a moment, and she wondered what he was taking from there. She did not get up to check. When he came back to the entryway, he stopped once more. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She set down the pen. "Yes." "When did you stop trusting me? Was it the messages or was it before that?" She considered the question seriously because it deserved a serious answer. "I never stopped trusting you," she said. "Trust wasn't the issue. I trusted you. And then I discovered that the person I trusted was not the person you actually were. Those are different things." She looked at him. "I trusted the Michael I believed I knew. It turns out I didn't know you as well as I thought. That's not a failure of my trust. That's a failure of your honesty." He absorbed that. "Was I ever the person you thought I was?" he asked. "At the beginning, I think you were trying to be," she said. "I think you wanted to be that person. I think somewhere along the way, wanting to be something and actually doing the work to become it felt too hard, and it was easier to let me carry the weight and take the credit." She paused. "That's not an accusation. It's just what I think happened." He picked up his bags. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what it's worth." "It's worth something," she said. "Not enough to change anything, but something." He walked out. The door closed. She looked at the legal pad in her lap and realized she had not written a single thing in the last 45 minutes. She wrote the date at the top of the page. She wrote quarterly priorities. And she went back to work. Timestamp 18 minutes. What Claire had not told Rebecca, had not told Mara, had not told anyone, was that the most difficult part of the 6 months had not been discovering the affair. It had been the week before the confrontation when she had almost called it off. Not because she wavered in her decision to end the marriage. That decision had been made re-examined, confirmed, and settled. She did not waver on that. She had wavered on the confrontation itself. She had lain awake at 3 a.m, 10 days before the second Friday of the month, and thought, what if I just file quietly? What if I have Rebecca serve the papers and walk away without the theater of catching him in the house? What if I simply remove myself from the situation and let the legal process do the rest? Why do I need him to know that I know? Why do I need to be in that room? She had thought about it for a long time, and then she had thought about the pearl necklace. Her mother had given it to her the year before she died. It was not enormously valuable in monetary terms, but it was the most deliberately chosen piece of jewelry her mother had ever given her. She had said when she pressed the box into Claire's hands, "These were your grandmother's and they're yours now, and someday when you look at them, I want you to remember that every woman in this family has been stronger than the men around her gave her credit for." Michael had not known the provenance of the necklace. He had simply reached into the closet and pulled everything out and let it fall. That was why Claire had needed to be in the room. Not for revenge, not for drama, not to humiliate him, but because there are moments in a life when the thing that has been done to you needs to be witnessed by the person who did it. When the reckoning cannot happen at a distance. When you need to stand in the room in your own house on your own ground and say clearly and without flinching, "I see what happened here, and I want you to see that I see it." She needed him to know she had seen it. That was all. And he had. She folded that thought away and got on with the work. Whitmore Innovations had grown in the 10 years of her marriage from a 30-person company to a company of over 300. The original product, a data management platform designed for mid-sized healthcare organizations, had expanded into 4 verticals, and the company had attracted significant venture interest twice, both times declined by Claire, in favor of maintaining control. The third offer currently on the table was different in scale and structure, and she had been wrestling with it for 3 months. She met with her CFO, James Okoye, on the Monday following Michael's departure from the estate. James was 55, methodical, and had been with the company for 7 years. He was one of the people she trusted most, and she trusted him in part because he never softened information to protect her feelings. "How are you?" he asked when she sat down across from him in the conference room. "Working," she said. "Tell me where we are on the Series C conversation." He did. For the next 2 hours, they moved through the structure of the offer, the implications of the equity arrangement, the strategic alignment with the acquiring firm's portfolio. It was complex and interesting and demanded her full attention, and she gave it her full attention. And for 2 hours, she was not a woman managing the end of a marriage. She was simply a founder doing her job. At the end of the meeting, James said, "You seem sharper than you were a month ago." She raised an eyebrow. "That's an odd thing to say." "You've seemed distracted for a while, not visibly not to most people, but I've worked with you long enough." He paused with the caution of a man who wanted to say something he was not certain he had permission to say. "Is everything okay?" She looked at him. She thought about how to answer. "It will be," she said. "It's becoming okay." He nodded and did not press further, which was one of the many reasons she valued him. Timestamp 28 minutes. The first salvo from Marcus Hale arrived 3 weeks later, and it was as Rebecca had predicted loud. Hale's letter argued that Michael Carter had made substantial non-financial contributions to the marital household over 10 years, that he had served as a de facto brand ambassador for Whitmore Innovations at numerous public events, that his presence and support had enabled Claire's career advancement, and that equitable distribution should account for his role in the success of the enterprise. Rebecca read Claire the relevant passages over the phone. Claire listened without interrupting. When Rebecca finished, she said, "Brand ambassador." "Yes. He attended 6 dinners and once told my head of product development that the company needed better marketing. That was the extent of his strategic input." "I know that and you know that," Rebecca said. "We'll need to document it precisely. Event attendance records, guest lists, any email correspondence where his role is defined or referenced. I also want statements from James and 2 or 3 other senior people who interacted with him over the years in a professional context. James will be straightforward. He has a clear memory of Michael's actual level of involvement. Good. What about the estate? I've already sent you the full property history, the trust documentation, the original purchase agreement, the renovation permits all in my name, the tax records going back 11 years. That's a strong position. Hale will have a difficult time arguing equitable interest in property that was never part of the marital estate to begin with. He'll try anyway. He'll try for about 30 days, Rebecca said, and then he'll advise his client to take a realistic position. Claire believed her, but she also knew that 30 days of noise was still 30 days, and that the noise had a way of touching things beyond the legal proceedings. Michael had a social world, their social world that had been built over 10 years, and Hale's aggressive positioning would have a purpose beyond the legal argument. It would be designed, at least in part, to create a counter-narrative. A version of events where Michael was a wronged party, kept in the dark about assets excluded from decisions that affected him, denied the acknowledgement he deserved. She had anticipated this. She had prepared for it in the same patient, methodical way she prepared for everything. She had not, however, anticipated that the first person from their social world to call her would be Leonard Ashby. Leonard Ashby was 67, a retired corporate attorney who had been one of Michael's closest friends for 15 years before Claire had ever met either of them. He was the kind of man who had opinions about everything and delivered them with the absolute confidence of someone who had never seriously been wrong in his own estimation. He and Michael played golf on alternating Saturdays. He had been at their wedding. He had given a toast that was in Claire's memory primarily about himself. He called her on a Wednesday evening. "Claire," he said, "I'm calling because I care about both of you." She recognized the opening. It was the opening of someone who was about to tell you things that were being framed as neutral, but were not neutral. "Hello, Leonard," she said. "I had lunch with Michael yesterday. He's in a very bad place." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" He said it with a lightness that was not light at all, "because from where I'm sitting, this whole thing seems like it could have been handled differently." She waited. "Michael has his faults," Leonard said. "He'll be the first to admit that. But you have to understand, Claire, the man has given you 10 years. He built his life around yours, and now you're going to—" "Leonard." Her voice was quiet and exact. "I'm going to stop you there because I want to be honest with you, and I think that's more respectful than letting you continue." A pause. "Okay," he said, slightly thrown. "Michael brought another woman into my home, twice. He told her the house was his. He threw my mother's belongings on the floor to make room for hers. He has spent years claiming credit for things I built, to people we both know in rooms I was not in. I have documentation of all of this." She paused. "Now, you're welcome to have a view about how I should respond to that. But I want you to have that view with accurate information, rather than with whatever version Michael has given you." Silence. "He didn't mention the belongings," Leonard said. "No, I didn't expect he had." Another silence, longer this time. "I didn't know it had gotten that far," Leonard said, and his voice was different now, the confidence rearranged into something more careful. "Most people didn't," Claire said, "because I handled it privately. That was a choice I made. But I want you to know, Leonard, that I don't have any interest in a social war. I'm not going to campaign against Michael. I'm not going to make phone calls or shape narratives. I am going to divorce him, and I'm going to do it as cleanly as the situation allows, and then I'm going to continue my life." She paused. "What he tells people about why is his business. I only ask that you remember this conversation." She heard him exhale. "You're a formidable woman," he said, not admiringly exactly, more the way you say something when you have encountered a reality that is larger than you expected. "Thank you," she said. "Give my best to Diane." She hung up. She sat for a moment in the stillness of the library, surrounded by her books in her chair in her house. Then she picked up the phone and called Mara. "Leonard Ashby just called me," she said when Mara answered. "What did he want?" "To advocate for Michael." "That man," Mara said with feeling. "He'll be fine," Claire said. "I told him the truth. Whether he does anything with it is his choice." "Do you think he will—" Claire thought about the pause in Leonard's voice when she mentioned the mother's belongings, the way the confidence had shifted into something else. "Yes," she said. "I think he might." Timestamp 38 minutes. What no one had told Olivia Harper was that the morning after the Ashford estate, she would wake up in her apartment and feel above everything else stupid. Not heartbroken, not angry, stupid. She lay in her own bed, her actual bed, in her actual apartment, the one she had been slowly caring about less for the past 8 months, because she had been spending so much time thinking about a future that had apparently existed only in Michael Carter's imagination, and she went through the evening in her mind with the clinical thoroughness of someone trying to understand a car accident they had been in. She thought about the things Michael had told her. He had said the estate was his achievement. He had said his wife was cold and disconnected. He had said the divorce was basically already decided, it was just a matter of paperwork. He had said that once it was done, they would live there together, and she had believed him, because why would she have reason not to? Because he had told it all so fluently, with such casual certainty, the way people talk about things that are simply true. She thought about Claire Whitmore Carter walking into that library, the way she had not been surprised, the way she had not been emotional, the way she had placed those folders on the table with the steady hands of a woman who had been carrying the weight of this knowledge for a long time and had simply been waiting for the right moment to set it down. Olivia thought she knew we were coming. She thought she was already in the house. She thought the entire evening was, and she struggled to find the word, and then it arrived, orchestrated. Not maliciously, not to humiliate her specifically, but deliberately carefully by a woman who had decided that the truth of her situation needed to be seen rather than just filed away in legal documents. And Olivia thought with a clarity that surprised her, I respect that. She also thought, I have to call my sister. Her sister Dana was 34, a nurse in Decatur no-nonsense, in the way that people who dealt with genuine emergencies daily became no-nonsense. I need to tell you something, Olivia said when Dana picked up. Okay. I've been seeing someone. He's married. A beat. Olivia. I know. How long? 8 months. Olivia. I know, Dana. That's why I'm calling. I need to tell someone who will tell me the truth. Dana did tell her the truth. She told her for about 20 minutes with the particular combination of love and absolutely zero patience that characterized Dana's approach to Olivia's life decisions. And Olivia listened because she had called specifically for that, and because she knew that the story she had been living in for the past 8 months had been someone else's fiction, and she needed something real. At the end of the 20 minutes, Dana said, What are you going to do? Nothing, Olivia said. There's nothing to do. I'm going to leave it alone and make better decisions going forward. Are you hurt? Olivia thought about it honestly. I'm embarrassed, she said, and I'm angry at myself. But no, I don't think I'm hurt. I don't think I was ever actually in love with him. I think I was in love with the story he was telling. That's more self-awareness than I expected. I'm full of surprises. Dana laughed despite herself. Come for dinner Sunday, she said. I'll make that pasta you like. Yes, Olivia said. Okay, yes. She hung up. She got out of bed. She went to make coffee in her own kitchen in her own apartment, which was small and slightly cluttered and completely incontestably hers. It felt like something. Timestamp 48 minutes. Rebecca's prediction proved accurate in its timeline, if not entirely in its character. 32 days after the first letter from Marcus Hale, a second letter arrived. It was significantly shorter than the first, and the language had undergone a notable adjustment. The aggressive claims about brand ambassadorship had been quietly retired. The argument about Whitmore Innovations' appreciation had been substantially narrowed, and the central ask had shifted from a share of the estate and business to a negotiated settlement of personal property and a period of transitional support. It was still more than Claire was inclined to give, but it was negotiable. She and Rebecca met in Rebecca's office on a Tuesday morning, the second letter printed and annotated between them on the table. He's come down significantly, Rebecca said. Yes, Claire said. What does that tell you? That Hale has reviewed the documentation and given his client a realistic assessment. Rebecca tapped the letter. The brand ambassador argument was always a reach. The estate argument was essentially impossible given the trust structure. What's left is personal property, which is legitimate, and transitional support, which is also technically legitimate given the length of the marriage and the income disparity. How much support are we talking about? Their number is 36 months. I'd argue for 12. We'll probably land at 18 to 24, depending on how cooperative he's willing to be on the property division. Claire looked at the letter. 18 months. 2 years possibly of monthly payments to a man who had thrown her mother's necklace on the floor and called another woman's name in her house. She breathed through it. "Acceptable," she said, "in exchange for a clean, comprehensive settlement with no future claims." "That's our position exactly." Rebecca looked at her. "This is going to be over, Claire, probably within 60 days from today." Claire nodded. She thought about something Mara had said the morning after the confrontation. The hardest part of being a person who plans well is that you have to live through the time between the plan and the outcome. She was living through that time. She was doing it. "There's one more thing I want you to include in the settlement terms," she said. Rebecca raised her pen. "A confidentiality clause," Claire said. "Not about the divorce, those are common enough that it won't read as unusual. Specifically about the Ashford estate, the property's ownership structure, the trust arrangement, the Bennett Legacy Holdings name. I don't want that in the public record as part of a contested divorce." Rebecca wrote, "Reason. Because the estate is not just my home," Claire said. "It's an asset I intend to use for something that doesn't need Michael's history attached to it." She paused. "And because some things deserve to stay mine." Rebecca looked at her for a moment. "Done," she said. Mara stayed at the estate for 3 weeks after the confrontation. She had intended to stay for the weekend, but Monday came and she called her office in Savannah and arranged to work remotely, and Tuesday she did the same, and by Wednesday she had stopped asking herself whether to stay and simply stayed. She and Claire had not spent this much time together since their early 30s, when they had both been starting out and used to drive to their parents' house for long weekends and talk through everything over their mother's cooking. Those years felt very distant now and very close simultaneously. They fell into a routine that felt oddly natural. Mara worked from the East Wing study in the mornings. Claire was at her laptop by 6 and usually finished with Whitmore work by early afternoon. They had lunch together, usually something simple, and talked sometimes about the divorce, sometimes about Mara's work, sometimes about their mother, sometimes about nothing in particular. One evening Mara said, "Do you know what you want this place to be going forward?" Claire had been thinking about exactly that for weeks. "I have some ideas," she said. "Tell me." Claire looked around the room. They were sitting in the main sitting room with its high ceilings and the fireplace and the windows that faced the garden. She had always loved this room best. It was the room that felt most like the house's heart. "I want to use it," she said. "Not just live in it. I've been living in it for 11 years and it's been my home and I love it, but it's been private. I want to open it up. Events. A foundation, possibly. Something for young entrepreneurs, women especially, who need access to the kind of space and support that I had to build from nothing." Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mom would have loved that." Claire looked at her. "She always said you hoarded yourself," Mara said. "She meant it kindly. She meant that you gave so much to work and kept the rest so private that people didn't get to experience what you were actually like." She wasn't wrong. "No," Mara smiled. "She rarely was." The fire in the fireplace crackled and shifted. Outside the garden was dark and still. Claire sat in her house in her room thinking about what came next. Not about Michael, not about the divorce, not about Hale's letter or the settlement timeline or the 60 days Rebecca had projected. She was thinking about the garden in spring, about the East Wing converted to meeting space, about young women sitting around the kitchen table with their laptops and their business plans, and someone, maybe her, maybe someone she hired, telling them the things she had had to figure out alone, about what it meant to build something, not just for yourself, but for what comes after you. She had built the Ashford estate into a home. Now she was going to build it into something larger, and not one piece of that future had Michael Carter's name on it. Not one corner, not one room, not 1 inch of the 30 acres, just like the deed, just like it had always been. The settlement offer landed on a Thursday. Rebecca called Claire at 7:45 in the morning, before Claire had finished her first cup of coffee, which was unusual enough that Claire knew before she picked up that something had shifted. "Hale submitted a revised proposal last night," Rebecca said. "I want you to come in this morning if you can." "How bad is it?" "It's not bad. That's why I'm calling early. It's actually Claire. I think he's ready to end this." She was in Rebecca's office by 9. The proposal was 6 pages. She read all 6 pages the way she read everything completely carefully, without skimming. Rebecca sat across from her and did not rush her. When Claire set the pages down, she said, He dropped the business claim entirely. Yes. And the estate argument. Completely withdrawn. No mention of Bennett Legacy Holdings, no claim of equitable interest, nothing. Claire looked at the pages again. What changed? Rebecca leaned forward slightly. I made some calls. Marcus Hale is a smart attorney and a pragmatic one. I think he looked at the documentation package we sent, the full trust history, the corporate records for Whitmore Innovations, the security footage, the recorded conversations, and he told his client the truth, which is that Michael has a sympathetic story and essentially no legal standing. And Michael accepted that. He's offering 18 months of transitional support division of personal property and a full release of all future claims, in exchange for a clean settlement and the confidentiality clause you requested. Claire sat with it for a moment. 18 months. She thought about what 18 months of payments to Michael Carter meant in the context of what he had done. She thought about her mother's necklace on the floor. She thought about Olivia Harper standing in her library in a dress that had been chosen for its effect, sipping wine that had been opened without permission. And then she thought about something her mother used to say: the cost of ending something cleanly is always less than the cost of dragging it out for pride. Accept it, she said. Rebecca nodded once. I'll have the final documents prepared by end of week. Good. Claire picked up her coffee cup, found it empty, set it back down. Is there anything else? One thing. Rebecca's expression shifted slightly, not concern exactly, but the careful look of someone about to say something they have been considering how to phrase. Hale asked informally whether you would be open to a brief in-person meeting with Michael before signing. Not to renegotiate, just a conversation. Michael's request, apparently. Claire looked at her. What kind of conversation? He didn't specify. Hale said Michael wants a chance to speak to you directly before it's final, without attorneys present. She thought about Michael sitting in her chair in the library, his face in his hands, saying, I can't find the version where I wasn't that person. Tell Hale I'll think about it, she said. She thought about it for 4 days. On the 4th day, she called Michael directly. He picked up on the second ring, which told her he had been waiting for the call. Claire, he said. You want to meet, she said. Yes. A pause. If you're willing. I'm willing. Not at the estate. There's a coffee place on Peachtree, the one near Piedmont Park, Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. I'll be there. She arrived 7 minutes early, ordered her coffee, found a table near the back where the noise of the room provided a kind of privacy. She was halfway through her cup when Michael walked in. He looked better than he had the day he came to collect his things, but not by much. He had lost weight. His jacket was one she recognized, a birthday gift she had given him 3 years ago, and she noticed that he had worn it deliberately, or maybe not deliberately, maybe just reached for it without thinking. Either way, it was there, and she noted it and moved past it. He sat down across from her. He ordered nothing. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the small table. Two people who had shared a bed and a breakfast table and a last name for 10 years, now sitting in a coffee shop about to formally close that chapter. Thank you for coming, he said. You asked, she said. What did you want to say? He put his hands flat on the table. She recognized the gesture. It was the one he used when he was trying to be deliberate, when he was fighting the impulse to perform and trying to simply be present. She had seen it rarely in their marriage. She was seeing it now. I wanted to tell you something that I couldn't say through attorneys, he said. Something that doesn't have anything to do with the settlement. She waited. I've been thinking about the 10 years, he said. Not the end of them, the middle, the good parts. And I've been trying to understand how I got from those years to standing in your house telling another woman it was mine. He stopped. I don't have an explanation that makes it okay. I'm not going to try to offer one. Good, she said. But I want you to know that I knew, he said. I knew who built what. I knew whose name was on what. I knew that when I walked into a room and people treated me like someone important, it was because you were beside me. I knew all of that. He looked at her directly. And I told myself it didn't matter because we were a team, and what was yours was mine, and what was mine was yours, and I convinced myself that was true, even when I knew it wasn't. Because the alternative was admitting something I didn't want to admit. What was that? She asked, and she was genuinely asking, not testing him. That I had failed to become the person I thought I would be, he said. that by the time I understood what it actually took to build something the way you build things, I had already spent 15 years not doing it. And instead of starting, I took credit for what you'd done and called it a partnership. The coffee shop was loud around them. Someone dropped a cup. A child laughed. Two men argued about something at the counter. Claire looked at the man across from her and felt something she had not expected to feel. Not forgiveness exactly, but something adjacent to it, something like understanding. The thing you feel when you look at a person clearly without the distortion of love or anger, and you see them as they actually are, limited and frightened and capable of doing harm without being entirely defined by that harm. "I know," she said. He blinked. "I've known for a long time," she said. "Not the extent of it, but the shape of it. I chose not to look at it directly, because looking at it directly would have meant acknowledging that the marriage I believed I had wasn't the one I actually had, and that was a loss I wasn't ready to take yet." She paused. "We both avoided things we shouldn't have avoided. That doesn't make what you did acceptable, but it means this wasn't entirely a surprise." He was quiet for a long time. "What do I do now?" he said. "With the rest of it, the rest of my life." She looked at him. "You start," she said. "You actually start. Not the performance of starting, not the announcement that you're going to build something. You put your hands on something real, and you work on it, and you accept that it will probably be smaller than what you imagined, and you build it anyway." She paused. "You're 52 years old, Michael. That is not too late. But it is late enough that you can't afford to keep pretending." He looked at her with something that was almost gratitude, and also pain, and also the specific expression of a person who has just been told a true thing they had been avoiding for a very long time. "Okay," he said. "Sign the papers," she said. "Let's close this cleanly." "Yes," he said. "I'll sign." She finished her coffee. She stood, put on her coat. "Claire," he said. She looked back. "I'm sorry about your mother's necklace." She held his gaze for one moment. "I know," she said, and she walked out. Timestamp 10 minutes. The papers were signed on a Wednesday afternoon, 5 weeks after Rebecca's early morning call. Claire signed in Rebecca's office in the same chair she had sat in for their very first meeting about this, and she signed without ceremony, steadily and completely. And when she set the pen down, she felt the particular quality of silence that follows the end of something that has been in motion for a very long time. Rebecca slid the documents into a folder. "It's done," she said. "Yes," Claire said. "How do you feel?" Claire looked at her hands on the table. She thought about the question seriously before she answered it the way she always did. "Like I've been carrying something very heavy for a long time," she said, "and I just set it down and my arms are still shaped around the weight of it, and it will take a little while before they remember what it feels like to just hang at my sides." She paused. "But lighter, yes, lighter." Rebecca smiled just slightly. "That's an accurate description." "I try." She drove home to the estate with the windows down, even though the morning air was cool, because she wanted to feel it. The garden was coming into its spring arrangement, the early bulbs up and the perennials beginning to assert themselves. She stood at the kitchen window for a long time, looking at it, thinking about what Mara had said about their mother, about hoarding herself, about the garden, about the house, about what came next. She had been waiting without formally naming the wait until the divorce was final to start the foundation work in earnest. She had discussed it with her estate attorney. She had pulled the legal structure together. She had identified a program director, a woman named Tanya Rhodes, who had run programming for a nonprofit accelerator in Atlanta for 8 years and came with a reputation for both warmth and operational rigor. She had been waiting. Now there was nothing left to wait for. She called Tanya that afternoon. "I'm ready to move," she said. "Can we meet this week?" "Thursday," Tanya said. "Thursday," Claire said. What happened next? And this was the part that no one who had watched the previous 6 months could have predicted, not even Mara, not even Rebecca, was that the story did not stay private. It had not been Claire's intention to make it public. She had negotiated a confidentiality clause specifically to prevent the estate's legal history from becoming tabloid material. She had handled the entire process with discretion and precision, and the specific privacy that came from being a person who did not discuss her personal life loudly. but other people talked. Leonard Ashby, to his credit, had apparently taken the conversation with Claire seriously. He had not, as she had feared, he might launched a quiet campaign in Michael's favor through their social circle. Instead, he had done something she had not anticipated. He had told a few mutual friends the accurate version of events. Not all the details, not the security footage or the folders or the library confrontation, but the essential shape of it, that Michael had brought another woman into Claire's house, that Claire had handled it with extraordinary composure, that the house was and had always been hers. Word moved, the way it always moves in a certain kind of social world, through dinners, through phone calls, through the particular velocity of a story that has the advantage of being true and interesting simultaneously. The first person from their professional world to reach out was a woman named Sandra Kowalski, who ran a venture capital firm in Atlanta, and whom Claire had known professionally for years without being particularly close to. She sent an email that was 4 lines long and entirely to the point. I heard a version of what happened. I don't need details. I just want you to know that if you're ever interested in grabbing lunch and talking about whatever comes next for you, I would be very glad to be at that table. Claire read the email 3 times, then she replied, "I would like that." Next week, they had lunch the following Tuesday, and it was one of the best professional conversations Claire had had in years. Candid, generative, 2 women who had built things in a city that had not always made that easy, talking about what they had learned and where they were going. Sandra said toward the end, "There's a group of us, not formal, nothing institutional, just a handful of women who have been building things for a while and find it useful to think together. Would you want to come sometime?" "Yes," Claire said without hesitation. "Good," Sandra said, "because frankly we've been wondering for years why you kept to yourself so much." Claire laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that surprised her by arriving without effort. "I'm working on that," she said. Timestamp 22 minutes. Meanwhile, Michael Carter was having a different kind of education. He had moved into an apartment in Midtown that was fine, clean, well located, and completely without the gravity of a home that had been built over years with intention. It had white walls and generic fixtures and a view of a parking structure, and Michael spent the first 2 weeks in it feeling the absence of everything he had taken for granted so comprehensively that he had never even noticed he was taking it for granted. The dishware was new. He had bought it at a department store, and it was perfectly adequate, and looking at it in the cabinet every morning produced in him a feeling he could not immediately name, and then finally did grief. Not for Claire exactly, for himself, for the version of himself he had failed to become. He had called his brother Paul the first week. Paul was 55, lived in Nashville, ran a landscaping company he had built himself from 4 employees to 40 over 20 years, and was the kind of person who had never claimed credit for anything that wasn't his, and therefore never found himself defending claims he couldn't support. Michael had called him and said, "I need to talk." Paul said, "I know, I've been waiting." "You knew." "I didn't know specifically. I knew something. You've been off for a couple of years, Michael. Not yourself." "What does that mean, not myself?" "It means," Paul said with the gentle bluntness of someone who had known you your whole life, "that you stopped being interested in anything that didn't make you look good. You used to care about things for their own sake. The business you started in your 30s, I know it didn't work out, but you were excited about it in a way that was real. And somewhere after that you just started performing. Like the thing that mattered was the audience, not the work." Michael sat on the floor of his new apartment. He didn't have a couch yet. He had not managed to acquire one, and listened to his brother say the thing he had been saying to himself for 4 days, and that felt different, more real, coming from outside himself. "What do I do?" he said. "What do you actually want to do?" Paul said. "Not what sounds impressive, not what makes a good story at a dinner party. What do you actually want to build?" Silence. "I don't know," Michael said honestly. "That's the start," Paul said. "That's actually the start. When you stop pretending you know and you sit with not knowing, that's when something real can begin." Michael leaned his back against the wall. "Claire said something similar," he said. "Claire is a smart woman," Paul said without particular gentleness. "You knew that. You just weren't willing to let it make you feel small, and so you turned it into something else." "Yeah," Michael said. "Yeah, I know." "Come to Nashville for a weekend," Paul said. "Get out of that apartment. I'll put you to work in the yard. We'll have dinner. We'll talk about it like people." Michael almost said he was too busy. He caught himself. "Okay," he said. "When me next weekend?" "Okay," Michael said. "Next weekend." I went. And Paul did put him to work, physical work, the kind he had not done in years, moving mulch and trimming back overgrowth and hauling things from one end of the property to the other. And at the end of the first day, sitting on Paul's back porch with a beer, aching in muscles he had forgotten existed, he felt for the first time in as long as he could honestly remember, genuinely present. Not performing presence. Actually in his body in the moment, without a narrative running in the background about how this would look or what it meant about him. Just tired and warm and here. Timestamp 32 minutes. The complication that Claire had not entirely planned for arrived in the form of a journalist. Her name was Priya Subramaniam, and she wrote for a business publication that covered Atlanta's entrepreneurial community. She had been profiling founders in the city for 6 years and had twice reached out to Claire for interviews that Claire had declined. She reached out a third time 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, with an email that was notably different in tone from the first two. I understand if you'd prefer to continue declining. But I want to be honest with you, there's a story circulating in this city's business community about who you are and what you've built, and I'd rather that story be told by you in your words than assembled from other people's impressions and incomplete information. I'm not interested in your personal life. I'm interested in Whitmore Innovations, your leadership, and what you're planning with the Ashford Foundation. If you're willing to talk, I'll write what I hear. If you're not, the story will still be told, just not by you. Claire read the email twice. She forwarded it to Rebecca with a single line, "Thoughts," Rebecca replied within 20 minutes. If you're ready to step forward, this seems like the right vehicle. She's well regarded. Her pieces are substantive, not gossip, but only if you're ready. Claire thought about what ready meant. She thought about Sandra Kowalski's lunch invitation and the group of women and the foundation planning meetings she had been having with Tanya Rhodes, and the way the estate had been slowly, room by room, preparing itself for something larger than a private life. She thought about her mother saying, "You hoard yourself." She wrote back to Priya, "I'm available Thursday morning. Come to the estate." She pressed send before she could second-guess herself. Priya Subramaniam was 38, small and precise, with the particular quality of attention that the best interviewers had. She made you feel that what you were saying was the most interesting thing she had heard all week, which created the dangerous temptation to keep talking. Claire recognized the technique and appreciated it without being susceptible to it. They sat in the main sitting room with coffee, and Priya set her recorder on the table between them and said, "Tell me how you started." So Claire told her. Not the version she had given at conferences or board meetings or the abbreviated biography on the Whitmore Innovations website. The real version. The version about being 27 years old with a business concept she had written on a legal pad, knocking on doors in Atlanta, with essentially no connections, and not enough capital, and the particular determination of someone who had decided that failure was acceptable, but quitting was not. The version about her father telling her carefully that maybe she should think about a more stable path. The version about the first year being so lean that she had calculated on a Tuesday in February that she had enough money to make payroll for exactly 1 more month. The version about the conversation with her very first investor, a 65-year-old man who asked her before anything else whether she had a husband to fall back on and how she had answered him. "What did you say?" Priya asked. "I said that was the wrong question," Claire said. "And that if he needed me to have a safety net to believe in the investment, then he didn't believe in the investment, and we should both save each other the time." Priya looked up from her notes. "And he wrote the check," Claire said. "He told me later it was the most useful thing anyone had said to him in a pitch meeting in 5 years. Priya smiled. "Can I ask about the foundation?" "Please." "The Ashford Foundation. What's the specific vision?" "There are a number of programs in Atlanta supporting women entrepreneurs. What makes this different?" Claire had answered versions of this question in planning meetings for weeks, but she found that saying it here in this room with someone whose job was to listen carefully made it feel newly concrete. "The difference," she said, "is access to space. Not just funding, not just mentorship, though we'll have both. Physical space, this estate. The kind of environment that communicates before a single word is spoken that you belong here, that you're worth this level of investment. There's something that happens to a person when they walk into a space that has been prepared for them at a high level. It tells them something about their own value." She paused. "A lot of the women we want to reach have been told in subtle and not so subtle ways that they don't belong in rooms like this. I want to change what the room says." Priya wrote for a long time without looking up. Then she said quietly, almost as if to herself, "That's very good." "It's what I believe," Claire said. Timestamp 42 minutes. The article ran 4 weeks later. It was 1,200 words, and it was accurate, and it was generous in the specific way that accuracy applied to a real story is generous, not flattering, not promotional, but honest in a way that revealed the subject clearly. Priya had not mentioned Michael. She had not mentioned the divorce. She had not mentioned anything personal beyond what Claire had offered voluntarily, which was very little. The piece was about Whitmore Innovations, its growth, its upcoming Series C, and the Ashford Foundation, with enough of Claire's actual voice threaded through it that people who read it felt they had encountered a real person rather than a corporate profile. The response was significant. Claire's inbox, which averaged 30 to 40 professional emails per day, received over 200 in the 48 hours following publication. Applications for the Foundation's first cohort, which had not yet formally opened, flooded the preliminary interest form on the website. 3 investors who had previously passed on the Series C reached out to reopen conversations. Sandra Kowalski sent a one-line email, "See, this is what happens when you let people see you." Claire read that one on her phone standing in the garden, and she laughed again, that same real laugh that still surprised her a little by how readily it arrived now. But the response that stopped her was not from a business contact or a potential investor or anyone she had met through Sandra's network. It was from a woman named Gloria Tran, 61 years old, a retired teacher in Marietta who had read the article in her daughter's copy of the magazine and found the Foundation's website, and written a 3-paragraph email that began, "I don't know if this is the right place to send this, but I've been trying to start something for 20 years, and I've always told myself I was too old and too late. And then I read what you said about space and belonging, and I thought maybe I should try one more time." Claire read the email twice. Then she forwarded it to Tanya with a note, "This is exactly who we're for. Make sure she gets a personal response." Tanya replied, "Already on it." Claire set the phone down and looked at the garden for a while. 20 years, Gloria Tran had said. 20 years of telling herself she was too old and too late. Claire thought about the women she had met in her career who had done the same thing, held themselves back, not because they lacked ability or ideas or drive, but because nobody had built the room for them yet. She was building the room. Not because Michael had taken something from her, and this was how she reclaimed it. That was not the reason. The reason was that the room needed to exist, and she was the person who could build it, and that was enough. That had always been enough. She had simply needed to stop filling the space with someone who was using it without contributing to it. She had stopped, and now there was room. Timestamp 52 minutes. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Michael called her one last time. She almost didn't answer. She looked at the name on her phone screen and considered briefly whether there was anything left that needed to be said between them. She answered. "I wanted to let you know something," he said. His voice was different. She noticed it immediately, not the practiced ease she had heard for years, not the slight elevation of confidence that she had come to understand was performance, something more level, more quiet. "I'm going back to Nashville," he said. "Paul offered me a role in the business, not a big role. Operations coordinator, basically. Logistics, scheduling, client contact." A short pause. It's not what I would have said I wanted 5 years ago." "And now," she said. "Now I think it might be exactly what I need," he said. "Something real, something where the work shows up in the world in a direct way, where I can't take credit for something I didn't do because the thing either got done or it didn't and everyone knows." She listened. "I'm not calling for your approval," he said quickly, and she recognized the self-awareness in it, the recognition of his own old pattern, the need for someone to validate the choice. "I know I don't need that. I'm calling because I wanted to tell someone who knew me when I was something other than this, and you're the only person I thought of." She sat with that for a moment. "That's a good plan," she said. "Paul is a good man. He'll tell you the truth." "He already has been," Michael said. "It's uncomfortable." "Most true things are," she said. Another pause. "I read the article," he said. "Ah. The foundation," he said. "The thing about building a room. That's what you always did, isn't it? Built rooms for things. The company, the estate, the marriage." He stopped. "I'm sorry I didn't understand what I was standing inside." She thought about what to say. "Go to Nashville, Michael," she said. "Build something." "Yeah," he said. "I will." "Good. She hung up. She put the phone in her pocket and stood in the garden for a long time in the quiet of the afternoon, with the bulbs coming up around her feet, and the Foundation's first planning meeting in 3 days, and the Series C negotiations entering their final phase, and 30 acres of land that had always been hers spread out around her in every direction. She thought about the woman she had been 6 months ago, sitting at the desk with the cold chamomile tea reading the messages on Michael's phone. She had been so still in that moment. People had asked her since Mara Rebecca James, a few others, how she had managed to stay that still, how she had not broken something, not cried, not confronted him that same night in a way that would have been messier and more human. The honest answer was that she had not felt the impulse to break anything. She had felt reading those messages not rage but a kind of clarifying cold, the sensation of finally seeing something in its actual form after a long time of seeing it in a version that was softer and less defined. It was not a pleasant feeling, but it was useful, and she had sat with it and thought carefully, and then called Rebecca. That was who she was. She had always been that person. Michael had mistaken her quietness for passivity, her patience for accommodation, her stillness for an absence of depth. He had been wrong about all of it, but he was learning. Slowly, expensively in the particular school that reality ran for people who had spent too long in a comfortable illusion, he was learning. She could not be angry at him anymore. She was no longer invested enough in his story to sustain the anger. Her own story was too interesting. She turned and went back inside to the house that had always been hers, to make a cup of tea that she would not let go cold, and to think about what she wanted to say to the first cohort of the Ashford Foundation when she stood in front of them in 6 weeks and told them why she had built this room. She already knew the beginning. She had always known how to begin. The first cohort meeting of the Ashford Foundation happened on a Tuesday morning in early April, 6 weeks after Claire had told Priya Subramaniam about building rooms for people who had been told they didn't belong in them. Tanya Rhodes had selected 12 women from over 300 applications, 12 women between the ages of 31 and 67, from backgrounds that ranged from corporate middle management to single-parent households to retired public service, all of whom had a business idea. They had been carrying some for months, some for years, some for so long that the idea had started to feel more like a wound than a plan. 12 women who had applied in their own words because something in the Foundation's language had reached through the screen and touched something they had stopped expecting to be touched. Claire had read every application personally. She had told Tanya she didn't need to. That was Tanya's job, the selection was Tanya's expertise, and Claire trusted her completely. But she had wanted to. She had stayed up until past midnight on 3 separate evenings going through the applications in the order they had arrived, reading the sections where applicants were asked to describe the moment they had first believed their idea was real. The answers had undone her quietly and completely, in the way that truth told simply and without embellishment tends to undo people who have been paying attention. One woman, a 54-year-old former hospital administrator named Carla Jeffries, had written, "The moment I believed it was real was the moment my daughter looked at me and asked why I was always talking about starting this thing instead of just starting it. She was 11. I didn't have a good answer." Another, a 38-year-old named Priscilla Osei, who had immigrated from Ghana at 22 and spent 16 years in corporate accounting, had written, "I believed it was real the first time I did the math, and the math worked. I've done the math 12 times since then, over 8 years, and it has always worked. I just kept finding reasons that this particular year was not the right year." And Gloria Tran, the retired teacher from Marietta who had sent the email that had stopped Claire cold, had written in her application, simply, "I believed it was real when I read that someone was finally building the room." Claire had put Gloria's application on top of the stack she kept on her desk, and she had looked at it every morning for 3 weeks. When Tuesday arrived, she was ready. The 12 women gathered in the main sitting room of the Ashford estate, which Tanya had arranged with careful intention chairs in a circle. Not a classroom arrangement, not a conference room hierarchy. Coffee and tea on a sideboard. Natural light. The room exactly as it always was, not staged or decorated or trying to impress anyone, just itself, substantial and warm and belonging to a woman who had chosen it deliberately. Claire stood at the edge of the circle and looked at them. They looked back. Some were nervous, she could see it in the way they held their cups, in the slight over-alertness of people who were not sure yet what this was, or whether they fully deserved to be in it. Some were trying to look like they were not nervous, which was its own kind of nervous. A few were genuinely calm with the specific ease of people who had decided before they arrived that they would make the most of whatever this turned out to be. Claire recognized all of these states. She had been in all of them at different points. She said, "I'm going to tell you something before we begin, and I want you to hear it once, and then we're going to set it down and get to work." The room was very quiet. "Everything in this house," she said, "was built by me. Not with me, not alongside a partner, not as part of a team that I'll tell you about later. By me. Alone at the beginning and then with people I hired and trusted and built alongside. I'm not telling you that to impress you. I'm telling you because the story of this house has an understudy version, a version where someone else was the central figure and I was the supporting role. That version was not true, but it was told, and it was told in this house, and I want to reclaim the room by telling you the true version before we do anything else." No one spoke. "You are the true version," she said. "You are what this room is for. Every idea you brought through that door today is the reason this house exists. Not as a monument to what I built, as a starting point for what you're going to build." She paused. "Now, Tanya is going to walk us through the program structure, and then each of you is going to tell us your name, your idea, and one sentence about why this is the year. Not why it might be the year, why it is." She sat down. Tanya began, and the room filled up with something Claire had been waiting for without knowing she was waiting for it. Timestamp 8 minutes. Gloria Tran spoke fifth. She was 61 with close-cropped silver hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and she held her coffee cup in both hands, the way Mara always did, which Claire noticed with a small private warmth. She spoke with the careful precision of someone who had spent 30 years explaining things to people who needed to understand them. "My name is Gloria Tran," she said. "My idea is a tutoring cooperative designed specifically for first-generation college students from immigrant families in the metro Atlanta area, not one-on-one tutoring. A cooperative model where students who have moved through the system successfully are paid to come back and work with students who are entering it, building the pipeline from the inside." She paused. "Why this is the year?" Another pause longer. "Because my youngest grandchild starts high school in September, and I would like him to look at his grandmother and see someone who finally finished what she started." The room was quiet for a moment after that. Then Carla Jeffries, who was sitting to Gloria's left, said, "That's beautiful," very quietly, not as a performance, but as a simple response to something that had moved her. Gloria looked at her and smiled. "Your turn," she said, and Carla spoke. Claire sat in her chair and listened to 12 women describe 12 ideas, 12 years of carrying something. 12 reasons why this particular Tuesday in April was the turning point, and she felt the weight of the house around her shift, not physically, not literally, but in the way that a space shifts when it is finally being used for the thing it was meant for. The library was better for books. The kitchen was better for people cooking in it together. The garden was better for growing things. The sitting room was better for this. She had not known that until now. Now she knew. After the formal session ended and the circle broke into smaller conversations, Tanya found Claire near the sideboard and said quietly, "That opening. What you said about the house." "Too much," Claire said. "No." Tanya shook her head. "Perfect. They needed to know what they were standing inside before they could stand in it fully." She paused. "Where did that come from?" Claire thought about it. 6 months of very quiet anger, she said, that eventually turned into something more useful. Tanya looked at her with the particular expression of a woman who understood exactly what that meant and did not need it explained further. "Well," she said, "it showed." Gloria Tran found Claire near the door as everyone was gathering their things to leave, and she stood in front of her with her hands clasped and said simply, "Thank you for building the room." Claire looked at her. "Thank you for walking into it," she said. Gloria's eyes went bright for just a moment. Then she put on her coat, said goodbye to the 2 women she had been talking with most of the morning, and walked out the front door of the Ashford estate with the particular posture of someone who has just been given permission to take up space they were always entitled to. Claire watched her go. She thought this. This is what the house was for. Timestamped 18 minutes. The Series C closed on a Thursday in late April, 14 months after the first preliminary conversations with the acquiring firm had begun. It was the largest transaction Whitmore Innovations had undertaken, and it was structured in a way that preserved Claire's operational control while providing the capital infusion. The company needed to enter the expansion markets James had identified 18 months earlier. The equity terms were favorable. The governance provisions were exactly what she had insisted on. The firm's track record with founder relationships was strong enough that she had not spent a single sleepless night worrying about what came after signing. She and James sat in the conference room after the final call with the firm's leadership and looked at each other across the table. "We did it," James said. "We did it," she agreed. "How do you feel?" "Like I need a very good dinner," she said. He laughed. "I'll book something." She thought briefly about the version of this moment that she had imagined during the years when Michael was still in the house. She had pictured telling him, had imagined his response, the pride he would perform, the way he would make the announcement to their friends, as though he had been part of the negotiation, the particular way he had of absorbing her achievements into his identity like a tide coming in. She did not feel sad about the absence of that. She felt the clean simplicity of having something be exactly as large as it was without someone standing in front of it, making it about themselves. She called Mara first. "The Series C closed," she said when Mara picked up. Mara screamed. Not dramatically, not a performance scream, but the genuine, involuntary, completely undignified yelp of a person receiving news that is better than they expected. And Claire sat at her conference table and laughed until her eyes watered. "Tell me everything," Mara said when she had recovered. "Everything is that it's done, and the terms are right, and the company is going to grow in ways I couldn't have managed alone. And you feel good." "I feel very good." "Good," Mara said. "You deserve to feel very good. Are you coming to Savannah this weekend?" "Yes," Claire said. "I'll drive down Saturday morning. I'll cook, nothing fancy." "Mara, your nothing fancy is better than most people's full effort." "That's true," Mara said cheerfully. "I'm a gifted woman. Saturday." She drove to Savannah on Saturday morning with the windows down, the whole way the late April air warm and specific smelling, like the season turning over into something generous. She arrived at Mara's house in the early afternoon, and Mara was in the yard, and they hugged in the way they had been hugging lately longer than before, with the particular quality of people who have been reminded that the people they love are worth holding on to. They sat in the yard and talked for 3 hours before dinner, about the foundation, about the Series C, about a man Mara had been seeing for 4 months who she described as possibly interesting, which from Mara was practically an endorsement. About their mother, which they did more easily now than they had in the years immediately following her death, the loss having settled into something they could carry rather than something that stopped them. About Claire specifically, who she was now, at 53 in the year, following the year that had undone and remade her. "You seem younger," Mara said. "I know that sounds absurd." "It doesn't," Claire said. "I feel lighter. The thing I was carrying was old. I'd been carrying it for years without knowing how heavy it had gotten." The marriage. Not just the marriage. The story I was telling myself about the marriage. The version where everything was fine and I was simply focused on work, and Michael was simply adjusting to a challenging position, and we would find our way back to each other eventually. She looked at her hands. That story was exhausting. I didn't know how exhausting until I stopped telling it. Mara was quiet for a moment. "Do you miss him?" she said. "Not the affair, not the last year, the early version, the person you married." Claire thought about it honestly. "Yes," she said. "Sometimes. The person I believed I was marrying. The possibility of that person." She paused. "But I've learned to separate missing the possibility from wanting the reality back. The reality was already gone. I was just the last person to let go of it." Mara reached over and tucked a strand of Claire's hair back, the way their mother used to, a gesture so specific and so unexpected that Claire felt it in her chest. "You're going to be okay," Mara said. "I know," Claire said. "No, I mean you're going to be more than okay. You're going to be extraordinary, more than you already are, and I want you to know that I see that. I see all of it." Claire looked at her sister in the afternoon light and thought about all the years they had let the distance between Savannah and Atlanta do more work than it should have, the way adult siblings allow geography to become an excuse for emotional shorthand summaries instead of conversations. The assumption that the person knows you well enough that you don't have to say the thing directly. "I love you," Claire said, plainly, not as punctuation. "I love you," Mara said. Now come help me with dinner because I lied about not needing help. Timestamp 28 minutes. What happened with Olivia Harper was not something Claire had planned for because she had not planned for Olivia at all beyond the night in the library. Olivia had left the estate that night, and as far as Claire was concerned, exited the story. She was not a villain. Claire had been clear about that in her own mind from the beginning. She was a young woman who had been deceived by a man skilled at constructing believable illusions, and whatever grief or embarrassment or recalibration she had experienced afterward was her own to manage. Claire had not expected to hear from her. The email arrived on a Friday morning 3 months after the divorce was finalized. It was 4 sentences long. Mrs. Carter, I know you have no reason to read this and every reason to delete it. I wanted to say that I am sorry for my part in what happened in your home. I believe things I should have questioned more carefully, and I will carry that. I also wanted to say that I read about the Ashford Foundation, and I think what you're building is extraordinary, and I'm glad the house belongs to someone who deserves it. Claire read it twice. She thought about not responding. Then she thought about what kind of person she wanted to be in the aftermath of this, not toward Michael. Not toward the legal process, but toward the individuals who had been swept through the edges of it and were now trying to find their footing. She wrote back 4 sentences. Olivia, I appreciate you writing. The situation was not primarily your fault, and I have not held it against you. I hope you are finding your way through it. If you ever want to speak further, I am open to that. She pressed send. She did not expect a response. She received one 2 days later, and it was longer, a real letter essentially in email form, in which Olivia described the 8 months of the relationship with Michael with a clarity and self-awareness that surprised Claire considerably. Not excusing herself, examining herself, looking honestly at what she had wanted from the situation and why she had been willing to accept things she should have questioned and what that said about her and what she wanted to do differently. It was, Claire thought, a remarkable piece of writing for someone who had just been through something humiliating. She wrote back more fully. And then over the following 2 months, something happened that neither of them would have predicted on the night they met in the library of the Ashford estate. They had a correspondence. Not frequent, not intimate, but real and substantive, 2 women on opposite sides of the same situation, finding in the wreckage of a man's poor decisions a small and unlikely mutual respect. Olivia applied to the Ashford Foundation's 2nd cohort. Her idea was a financial literacy program for young women in their 20s. The specific gaps in financial understanding that she recognized from her own experience, the ways that women her age were kept financially dependent by a combination of inadequate education and cultural messaging that told them money management was someone else's job. Tanya called Claire when the application arrived. "You need to see this one," she said. "I've seen it," Claire said. A pause. "You know who this is?" "Yes." And the idea is excellent," Claire said. "Evaluate it on its merits. If it makes the cohort, it makes the cohort." Another pause longer. "Claire," Tanya said with a mixture of admiration and exasperation that Claire had come to recognize as Tanya's version of being impressed. "You are something else." "Is the idea strong?" Claire said. "It's very strong." "Then that's the answer." Timestamp 38 minutes. The second twist that nobody saw coming arrived through James Okoye on a Monday morning 9 days before the Foundation's first cohort completed their program. James called her into his office, which was itself unusual. Generally, it was Claire who called meetings, not the other way around, and when she sat down, she saw that he had a folder open on his desk, and his expression had the particular quality of someone carrying information that is complicated in its implications. "I need to show you something," he said. "Show me." He slid a document across the desk. It was a printout of a business registration, an LLC filed in Georgia 6 weeks earlier. She looked at the name. Carter Ventures LLC. She looked at the registered agent. Michael Carter. She looked at the stated business purpose, entrepreneurial consulting and business development services. She set the paper down. James was watching her carefully. "He filed it clean," James said. "No connection to Whitmore, no use of anything that would create a legal issue. I had our counsel review it the moment I saw it. There's nothing actionable." "I know," Claire said. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not," she said. "He told me he was going to start something. I didn't know the specifics, but I believed him." She looked at the registration again. Consulting and business development. That's actually a reasonable fit for his skills. He's charming. He reads people well. He can walk into a room and make people feel like they've been waiting for him." She paused. "Those are real skills. He just applied them to the wrong purposes for a very long time." James looked at her with the particular expression he got when she said something that recalibrated his understanding of a situation. "You're not angry," he said. "No," she said. "I'm genuinely not." She handed the paper back. He needed to start. He finally started. "That's good." She stood. "Is there anything in that filing that requires our attention?" "No," James said. "Then we have a board prep call in 20 minutes and I haven't finished the deck." He almost smiled. "Go finish the deck." She went, but she sat at her desk for 2 minutes before she opened the laptop, holding the information quietly, letting it settle into its proper place in the story she was telling herself about all of this. Michael Carter had started something, a small something, an uncertain something, a something that might fail and might not, might grow into a real business, or might fold in 18 months, nobody knew yet, including him. But he had started. She thought about Paul's porch and the beer and the aching muscles. She thought about the apartment in Midtown with the white walls. She thought about the man who had sat across from her in the coffee shop near Piedmont Park and said, "I can't find the version where I wasn't that person," and then stayed in that discomfort instead of running from it. She hoped clearly and without residue that Carter Ventures succeeded, not for his sake as her ex-husband, for his sake as a human being who had finally decided to do the harder thing. She opened her laptop. She finished the deck. The Foundation's first cohort completed their 12-week program on a Saturday morning in late June in the main sitting room of the Ashford estate with their families invited. The room was full in a way it had never been full before, not with the careful, curated fullness of a dinner party or a corporate event, but with the generous, slightly chaotic fullness of a room where people genuinely wanted to be present. Children sat on the floor. Partners leaned against the walls. Tanya had arranged for a small catering setup in the hallway, nothing elaborate, and the smell of coffee and something warm moved through the house in a way that Claire felt in her chest. She sat in the second row and watched each of the 12 women stand and present what they had built over the 12 weeks, not finished businesses, not launched companies, but plans with substance frameworks, with real thought in them, ideas that had moved from something carried privately to something shown to the world and not flinched from. Carla Jeffries presented a full business plan for a child care cooperative in her neighborhood with 3 letters of interest from potential founding members and a preliminary conversation with a community development lender. Priscilla Osei presented a detailed financial model for her accounting services firm targeting small immigrant-owned businesses with 2 clients already signed pending formal launch. And Gloria, trans 61 years old, 30 years of teaching in her body, her grandchild starting high school in September, presented a slide deck for the tutoring cooperative that was so thoroughly researched, so carefully constructed, so full of real data and real relationships and real plans, that when she finished the room was silent for a moment before someone started clapping, and then everyone was clapping, and Gloria stood there looking slightly stunned, as if she had not entirely believed until this moment that the room would respond this way. Claire was on her feet before she fully decided to stand. She was not the only one. Timestamp 48 minutes. After the families had gone and the catering had been cleared and Tanya had said goodbye with the specific tiredness of someone who had just finished something large and good, Claire walked through the house alone. She went room by room, not intentionally just moving through the space the way she sometimes did in the evenings when she needed to think without sitting still. The library with its restored shelves, the study, the kitchen which smelled of the morning's coffee and someone's child's birthday cupcakes that had been left on the counter, the hallway that led to the east wing where Mara had stayed for 3 weeks after the confrontation. She stopped outside the master bedroom. She stood in the doorway for a moment. The room was exactly as she had reclaimed it after Michael left. She had repainted it herself over 2 weekends with Mara's help, a deep blue-green that was entirely hers, and nothing like the neutral palette Michael had preferred. New bedding, the books she wanted on the nightstand, rather than the ones she'd kept out of a vague sense of what the room should look like. The floor where the pearl necklace had landed the night Michael threw it, she had refinished that section herself one Saturday afternoon with a sander and a new stain until the wood was exactly as it should be. The necklace itself was in the jewelry box on her dresser, cleaned and repaired. She wore it sometimes, not every day, but sometimes. She looked at the room for a moment. Then she walked in, sat on the edge of the bed, and called her mother. She did not call her mother. Her mother was gone. But she had the particular experience sitting there in the blue-green room in the house she owned completely, and had always owned completely, that her mother was nevertheless present not as a ghost, not as a mystical phenomenon, but as the accumulated weight of everything her mother had ever said to her that had turned out to be true. The strength of the women in this family, the thing about hoarding herself, the necklace pressed into her hands with the instruction to remember. She was remembering. She was in fact doing the thing her mother had described, not hoarding herself, not keeping the best of herself behind a private wall, but opening the room, letting people in, using what she had built for something that extended past her own story. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. It was Sandra Kowalski. The text said, "Her to the cohort completion was extraordinary. The group wants to host a reception for the foundation in the fall. Real donor cultivation, proper fundraising. Are you ready to go bigger?" Claire read the text. She thought about 12 women who had walked into her house 6 weeks ago with ideas they had been carrying too long. She thought about Gloria Tran's grandchild starting high school in September. She thought about the Series C money and the foundation's operating budget and what Tanya had said in their last meeting about what the second cohort could look like if the donor base expanded the way she believed it could. She typed back, "Yes, let's go bigger." She pressed send. She sat in the blue-green room in her house in the quiet of a late Saturday afternoon in June, and she let herself feel it fully. Not pride exactly, though pride was in there, but something more complete than pride. The specific satisfaction of a person who has done the difficult thing, the honest thing, the thing that required more courage than anyone watching could see, and come out the other side, not just intact, but genuinely durably changed. Not harder, not closed. Changed in the direction of more open, more willing, more present. She stood. She smoothed the bedspread where she had been sitting. She walked out of the room, leaving the door open behind her, and went downstairs to make herself dinner in her kitchen, in her house on 30 acres of land that had always been hers. The name on the deed had never wavered, and neither, it turned out, had she. Sandra Kowalski knew how to throw a party the way some people knew how to argue a case, with precision, with intention, and with an absolute refusal to leave anything important to chance. The fall reception for the Ashford Foundation was her idea, her organization, and largely her guest list, though. She had spent 3 weeks in August consulting with Claire and Tanya about every detail, sitting at the kitchen table of the estate, with her laptop and her reading glasses, and a level of operational focus that Claire recognized and respected immediately. 200 guests, Sandra said at their first planning meeting. Minimum. I want the room full enough that people feel the energy of it, but not so full that it becomes a networking event where nobody talks to anybody real. Who are you thinking? Claire said. 40% existing donors and community anchor relationships. 30% prospective major donors, people with the capacity to fund a full cohort independently. 20% press and community leadership, because the story of this foundation needs to be told by people with reach. 10% wildcards. She looked up from her laptop. My wildcards are better than most people's sure things. Claire smiled. I believe that. The cohort women present, Sandra said, all 12 of them from the first cohort. Their families, if they want them there. They are the argument, not the pitch deck, not the funding numbers, not the Whitmore innovation story. They are the reason anyone should write a check. Tanya, sitting at the end of the table, said, Gloria Tran's Cooperative just signed its first formal partnership agreement with the Gwinnett County Middle School. Sandra pointed at her. That is what leads the evening. Claire looked at her foundation's program director and her closest new professional ally sitting at her kitchen table, talking about what mattered and why, and she felt the specific satisfaction of a person who has finally stopped managing the gap between the life she was living and the one she actually wanted. There was no gap anymore. She was living directly in the thing. October 15th, Sandra said. I need 8 weeks of lead time minimum. Can we do October 15th? October 15th, Claire said. Timestamp 8 minutes. The weeks between that kitchen table meeting and October 15th were the fullest weeks Claire had lived in years. Not the busiest she had had, busier in the early years of Whitmore Innovations, when she was running a company on insufficient sleep and too much coffee and the raw fuel of believing completely in what she was building. but the fullest in the sense of a life where every moving part felt genuinely connected to something real. The Series C integration was proceeding on schedule. James was leading the operational expansion with the methodical rigor that had always made him invaluable, and Claire was spending more of her time in the strategic layer conversations with the new partner firm's leadership, the roadmap for the next product cycle. A keynote she had been asked to deliver at a founders conference in November that she had for the first time in years agreed to give. The foundation's second cohort selection was underway, and Tanya had told her that the application pool for the second round was triple the size of the first, a direct result of the profile. Priya Subramaniam had written the cohort completion event in June, and the informal word of mouth that moved through the networks of 12 women who had walked out of the Ashford estate changed, and Olivia Harper had made the second cohort. Her financial literacy program had been evaluated on its merits as Claire had directed, and it had been strong enough to earn its place without requiring anything from Claire, except the instruction to judge it fairly. Tanya had told Claire the news on a Thursday afternoon with the same carefully neutral expression she had deployed when she first raised the application, waiting to see how Claire received it. "Good," Claire said. "You're sure you're comfortable with this?" Tanya said. Not a question exactly. A check. "Tanya," Claire said, "the program is excellent. The woman has done serious work. The people she wants to serve are exactly the people we exist for. The rest of it is history, and history doesn't get a vote in cohort selection." Tanya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to say something, and I want you to know that I'm saying it as your program director, and not as someone who's overstepping." "Say it." "You are the most unusually non-petty person I have ever worked for," Tanya said. "And I have worked for some good people." Claire laughed. "It's not the absence of pettiness," she said. "It's that I decided a long time ago that I couldn't afford it. Pettiness is expensive. It costs you attention and energy and time that I would rather spend on things that grow." Tanya looked at her. "Can I put that on the Foundation's website?" "Absolutely not," Claire said. "Get back to work." The call from Paul Carter came on a Wednesday morning 3 weeks before the October reception, and Claire almost missed it because she did not immediately recognize the Nashville number. She picked up on the fourth ring. "Claire, it's Paul, Michael's brother." "Paul," she sat up slightly. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," he said quickly. "Everything is fine. I'm sorry to call out of nowhere. I got your number from Michael. He didn't know I was calling. I want to be clear about that. I'm not doing this on his behalf." "Okay," she said carefully. "What can I do for you?" Paul Carter's voice had the same quality as his brother's in certain registers, the same underlying warmth, the same capability for directness, but without the performance layer that had always been Michael's default setting. He sounded, Claire thought, like a man who was used to saying what he meant. "I wanted to call you," Paul said, "because Michael has been working with me for 5 months now, and I wanted you to know how it's going. Not because I think you need to know or that it's your business, but because I know what he put you through and I know what you gave him in that coffee shop conversation, and I think you deserve to hear the result of it." She sat with the unexpected weight of this for a moment. "Tell me," she said. "He's different," Paul said. "Not completely, he's still Michael, still too charming for his own good, sometimes still walks into a room like he owns it. But the underneath is different. He works. He actually works. Not for the story of working, not to have something to say at dinner, he works. He showed up at 6 in the morning last Tuesday because a client had an emergency scheduling problem, and he wanted to solve it before I even knew about it." A pause. "I haven't seen him like this since we were kids before he decided that effort was something to be managed rather than given." Claire absorbed this quietly. "I'm glad," she said, and meant it completely. "Carter Ventures is going to be real," Paul said. "It's small, it's early, but it's his. He built the first 2 client relationships himself. He's learning how to build something without someone else's foundation underneath it. That's what he needed," Claire said. "He always needed to find out what he was actually capable of without the shortcut." "Yes," Paul said. "I think so too." He paused. "I also want to say, and I'll say it once, and then it's said, what he did in your home was wrong. The woman, the things he told her, the way he treated what you built. I've known my brother a long time, and I've made excuses for him more than I should have. I'm not making excuses for that." "You don't need to apologize for him, Paul." "I know. I'm not apologizing for him. I'm just acknowledging it, because I think it matters that someone in his family says it directly." She looked out the window at the garden, which was in its October configuration. Now the summer things done, the fall things asserting themselves, the particular beauty of a season that was honest about coming to an end. "Thank you for calling," she said. "Thank you for what you said to him in that coffee shop," Paul said. "You didn't have to say any of it. You could have just signed the papers and walked away. What you said gave him something to actually work with." She thought about the coffee shop, the 2 cups, the jacket he had worn that had been her birthday gift to him. "I said it for him," she said, "but I also said it for me. I needed to say it once clearly to the actual person before I could close it completely." "I understand that," Paul said. They said goodbye, and she sat for a long time after she hung up, holding the phone in her lap, in the particular stillness that follows an unexpected thing that is also somehow exactly right. Timestamp 20 minutes. October 15th arrived with the cool, specific clarity of a fall evening that seems to understand its own importance. By 7 o'clock, the estate was full. Not the careful, curated, full of the dinner parties Claire had hosted during her marriage, the precisely counted settings, the approved guest list, the quiet pressure of an event that was always in some layer, a performance of someone else's idea of success. This was a different kind of full. People moved through the rooms of the Ashford estate with the ease of people who had been told they belonged there and believed it, which was exactly the instruction Sandra had given in her brief welcome remarks before releasing the crowd to the evening. Sandra had said 3 things. She had said this foundation exists because one woman decided that the room she had built was too good to keep to herself. She had said the work you will hear about tonight is not theoretical. It is happening right now in this city by people who were told for too long that the room wasn't for them. She had said your job this evening is to listen first and then decide what you want to be part of. Then she had stepped aside, and Gloria Tran had walked to the front of the room. Claire watched Gloria from the back, where she had stationed herself deliberately, not in the front, not at the center, not in the position of the person to whom all attention returned. She was in the back holding a glass of water she had not drunk, watching 12 women move through a room full of strangers and make the case for their own ideas with a confidence that had not existed 12 weeks ago. Gloria spoke for 8 minutes. She spoke about the tutoring cooperative, about the Gwinnett County Middle School Partnership, about the 2 high school tutors she had already recruited, who were themselves first-generation college graduates and who had, she said, cried at the first training session because nobody had ever asked them to come back and use what they had learned. She spoke about her grandchild who would start high school in the spring and what she wanted him to understand about the women in his family. She said, "I spent 20 years telling myself I was too late. I want to use the rest of my time proving that wrong." The room was absolutely quiet when she finished. Then the applause started, and it was the kind of applause that surprised itself by how much it meant. Sandra found Claire in the back of the room during the reception portion of the evening, handed her a glass of wine she actually did drink, and said, 14 commitments already, 3 of them significant." "How significant?" Claire said. Sandra told her the number. Claire blinked. "Sandra, I told you my wild cards were better than most people's sure things." Claire laughed. "You did say that." "There's one more thing," Sandra said, and her tone changed slightly, still businesslike, but with something careful underneath it. "There's a woman here who asked to speak to you. She came with the Kowalski group table, so she's legitimate, but she's not someone I know well. Her name is Dr. Renata Voss. She runs a private family foundation out of Buckhead. Very old money, very private, not someone who shows up at many events." "What does she want?" "She wouldn't tell me," Sandra said. "She said she wanted to speak to you directly." A pause. "Claire, she endowed 3 chairs at Emory last year. Alone." Claire absorbed this. "Where is she?" she said. Timestamp 30 minutes. Dr. Renata Voss was 74 years old, small and precise, with white hair cut close and the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where patience was the most powerful currency. She was standing near the library doorway when Claire found her holding a glass of white wine she had also apparently not drunk, studying the bookshelves with the genuine attention of someone who read. "Dr. Voss," Claire said. The woman turned. Her eyes were sharp and warm simultaneously, which was not a combination Claire encountered often. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, "thank you for coming to find me. I know you have a room full of people." "I have a room full of people who are doing exactly what they should be doing," Claire said. "What can I do for you?" Dr. Voss looked at her for a moment, with the assessing directness of someone who had met a great many people and had learned to distinguish quickly between the ones who were performing and the ones who were present. Apparently she found what she was looking for, because she said, "I'll be direct with you. I've been following Whitmore Innovations for 4 years. I read the Subramaniam profile in the spring. I heard what happened with the Foundation's first cohort from 3 separate sources before I received Sandra's invitation tonight." She paused. "I do not make public commitments. I do not attend events that are primarily about being seen. I am here tonight because I wanted to look at this operation in person and decide whether it is what it appears to be." Claire looked at her. "And it is more than it appears to be," Dr. Voss said, "which is unusual. Most things are less." She set her wine glass on the bookshelf beside her. "I want to fund the Ashford Foundation's expansion. Not a 1-year commitment, a 10-year endowment. The kind of money that means you never have to spend your time on fundraising again, that you can spend it entirely on the work." The number she named was large enough that Claire went completely still for a moment. Not from shock exactly, from the specific feeling of something you have been building toward arriving faster and larger than you calculated. "Dr. Voss," she said carefully, "that's an extraordinary commitment." "Yes," the older woman said. "I make extraordinary commitments to things I believe in. I don't make them often, which is why I can make them at scale when I do." She looked at Claire directly. "What I want in return is not recognition or naming rights or a seat on your board. I want the foundation to remain exactly what it is tonight, exactly this, not larger in a way that loses the specificity of what you're doing, larger in a way that deepens it." She paused. "Can you promise me that—" Claire thought about Gloria Tran saying, "I spent 20 years telling myself I was too late." She thought about Priscilla Osei, who had done the math 12 times over 8 years, and always found it worked, and always found a reason to wait. She thought about Olivia Harper's financial literacy program for women in their 20s, which was going to teach a generation of young women something she herself had learned too late to be useful to herself, but not too late to pass forward. She thought about what she had said to Sandra. "Yes, let's go bigger." "Yes," she said to Dr. Voss, "I can promise you that." The older woman extended her hand. Claire shook it. And that was how the Ashford Foundation became something that would outlast every other thing that had happened in that house. Timestamp 40 minutes. Later that night, after the last guest had gone, and Sandra had said goodbye with the particular satisfaction of a person who has run a successful operation and knows it, and Tanya had stayed to help the catering crew clear the last of the tables, Claire walked through the quiet house alone. This had become her practice, this end-of-evening walk through the rooms, a private accounting of the day, the kind of deliberate solitude that recharged her in a way that no amount of sleep could replicate. She had done it for years, even during the marriage, even when Michael was in the house, because she had always needed this, the house, the quiet herself. She stopped in the library. She stood where she had stood 11 months ago, when she had walked into this room and found Michael and Olivia Harper, with the wine she had not given permission to open, and placed 2 folders on the table in the space between who she had been and who she was going to become. The table was there, the chairs were there, the bookshelves were there exactly as they had always been. The room looked like itself, but it did not feel like that night anymore. She thought about the question Mara had asked her on the morning after the confrontation. "How are you this calm?" She thought about her real answer, which she had not given Mara then because it was not entirely formed yet. The real answer was that she had never been performing calm. She had been inside it. She had reached it through 6 months of doing the hard work of understanding her situation, clearly preparing for it carefully, and deciding who she wanted to be when the moment arrived. The calm was not a mask over something more turbulent. It was the real thing, built the way she built everything, with time, with attention, with the refusal to shortcut the process. Michael had mistaken that calm for distance. He had mistaken her patience for passivity and her stillness for emptiness. And in doing so, he had made the defining error of his life. He had bet against the person who was, by any honest measure, the most formidable individual in any room they had ever shared. He was learning that now. In Nashville with his brother, with dirt under his fingernails and a client list that was genuinely his, he was learning that the thing he had tried to take by standing in front of it and calling it his name had never been available for taking. It had always been rooted in something he had never understood, the specific quality of a person who builds from the ground up, who does not need an audience to sustain the effort, who measures success not by how it looks, but by whether the foundation holds. The foundation held. It had always held. She was still in the library when her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen expecting Sandra with a post-event message or Tanya with a logistics question. It was Mara. The text said, "I know it's late. How did it go?" Claire looked at the message for a moment. Then she typed back, "Dr. Renata Voss, 10-year endowment, enough that we never have to ask again." She watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice, which meant Mara was trying to find words and discarding them. Then Claire Margaret Whitmore, then go to sleep. But first tell me the number. Claire told her the number. The 3 dots appeared again. Mara's response was 4 words, Mom would be screaming. Claire put her hand over her mouth to keep the laugh from filling the whole library at midnight. She typed back, she would have cried first, then screamed. Mara sent a single heart. Claire put her phone in her pocket. She stood in her library, in her house on her land, at the end of the best evening she had lived in years, and she let herself feel the full, undiluted weight of it. Not pride though pride was present. Not triumph though there was triumph. Something larger than both of those. Something that had no clean single name, but that felt in her body like the sensation of finally being exactly where she had been trying to get to, not the destination, because she understood now that there was no destination. That building was not a thing you completed, but a thing you committed to, but the right place. The place where her effort and her values and her capacity were all pointed in the same direction, without the drag of carrying someone who refused to walk. The pearl necklace was around her neck. She had not planned to wear it tonight. She had put it on this morning almost without thinking, the way you reach for something that belongs to you without needing to justify the reach. She touched it now briefly. She thought about her mother pressing the box into her hands. These were your grandmother's, and they're yours now. And someday when you look at them, I want you to remember that every woman in this family has been stronger than the men around her gave her credit for. She remembered. She was remembering right now. Timestamp 50 minutes. The morning after the reception, Gloria Tran called. It was early 7:15 and Claire was still in her robe with her coffee when the phone rang and she answered it the way she answered everything directly without hesitation. Gloria, good morning. Good morning. Gloria's voice had the particular quality it always had, measured clear with the warmth underneath, that 30 years of teaching children had put there permanently. I wanted to call before the day got busy. I wanted to say something to you while it was still fresh. Say it, Claire said. Last night, Gloria said, standing in that room, speaking to those people. A pause. I have taught children for 30 years. I have watched people learn things. I know what it looks like when a person understands something they didn't understand before. And last night I watched 200 people in that room understand something. What did they understand? Claire said. That this is real, Gloria said. That the foundation is real, that the women are real, that the work is real. But also, and this is what I wanted to tell you directly, they understood that you are real. Not a brand, not a story, not a profile in a magazine. A real person who built something real and opened it to people who needed it. A pause. That is rare, Ms. Whitmore. I have been in a lot of rooms in 61 years. That is genuinely rare. Claire sat with this for a moment. Gloria, she said, can I tell you something, please? The reason this foundation exists, Claire said, is not a generous or admirable reason at its origin. It exists because I had a house that had been used to tell a lie about who built what, and I needed to make the house true again. I needed it to reflect accurately who I am and what I value. She paused. The origin story is not noble. It's personal and it's imperfect, and it came out of pain that I am still not over exactly, but working through in the way that honest people work through painful things. I know, Gloria said. You know, I knew from the first morning, Gloria said, when you stood in that circle and said what you said about the house, about the understudy version of the story. I knew something had happened in that house that you were reclaiming. A pause. Ms. Whitmore, every room I have ever loved was built by someone who needed it. The need is not the problem. The need is the beginning. What matters is what you do with it. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. Your granddaughter is going to be very lucky, she said, to watch you do this. My grandson, Gloria corrected gently. Your grandson, Claire said. I'm sorry. "Don't be sorry," Gloria said. "He's already proud of me. He told me last night before bed. He said, 'Grandma, you were in a mansion.'" A brief, bright pause. "He's 12. A mansion is the relevant detail." Claire laughed fully without managing it. "Get some rest," Gloria said. "You earned it." "You too," Claire said. "We have work to do next week." "We do," Gloria said. "I'm looking forward to it." They hung up. Claire sat at her kitchen table with her coffee and the morning quiet of the house around her, and she thought about what Gloria had said. "The need is not the problem. The need is the beginning. What matters is what you do with it." She thought about Renata Voss's 10-year endowment and what 10 years of sustained, serious, properly funded work could produce in the lives of women who had been waiting too long to be told the room was for them. She thought about the second cohort beginning in 3 weeks with Olivia Harper and 11 other women who had earned their places. She thought about Whitmore Innovations in its expansion phase with the partner firm and the new capital and the 3 product verticals. James had mapped out the company that was larger now than she had dared to project when she started it in a rented office with 4 employees and a legal pad full of plans. She thought about Mara, who was driving up from Savannah next weekend, who had said she was thinking about opening a satellite office of her architecture firm in Atlanta, which was not a casual thing to say, which meant the distance that had done more work than it should have for 20 years was beginning finally to close. She thought about Paul Carter in Nashville and Michael with dirt under his fingernails and a client list that was genuinely his. She thought about Dr. Renata Voss standing in her library with a glass of white wine she hadn't drunk, looking at the bookshelves with genuine attention and saying most things are less than they appear to be. This is more. And she thought about a night 11 months ago when a man had taken her dresses off their hangers and thrown them on the floor and handed another woman a key to a house that had never belonged to him. She thought about that night clearly without flinching, the way she thought about all difficult things directly, completely, without looking away. And she thought that night was the beginning of this. Not because what he did was acceptable, not because the pain had been worth it in the way that people sometimes tried to package loss into a lesson that made it smaller and more manageable than it actually was, but because she had stood in that room and been exactly who she was, clear, prepared, unbroken, and because being exactly who she was had turned out to be enough, more than enough. It had been the whole foundation. Everything that came after had been built on the same foundation that had always been there waiting for her to stop sharing it with someone who didn't understand what it was made of. She set down her coffee cup. She got up from the table. She had a call at 9, a foundation meeting at 11, and a lunch with Priya Subramaniam, who had asked if she would be willing to speak on a panel at the magazine's annual leadership event in December. She was going to say yes. She had decided sometime between the library and this kitchen on this morning that yes was going to be her default. Yes to the room, yes to the panel, yes to Mara's office in Atlanta, yes to the second cohort, yes to the 10-year endowment, yes to all of it. The whole generous, demanding, never-finished project of building things that mattered and opening them to people who needed them. The deed to the Ashford estate was in the trust documents in the filing cabinet in her study. Bennett Legacy Holdings, her name, her signature, her foundation, her house, her company, her life built by her hands, sustained by her will, belonging to her completely, and made larger now by being shared with the people who deserved to stand inside it. Michael Carter had walked through that door believing he was taking possession of something. He had been wrong about the house. He had been wrong about the marriage. He had been wrong about the woman. And Claire Whitmore had spent 11 months quietly and completely, and without a single moment of cruelty proving it. She walked into her study, sat down at her desk, opened her laptop. The morning light was clean and direct. She began. The woman who built the room had never once needed anyone's permission to be inside it, and she never